Last I saw Gray, he was flying through the air and into some sort of acid bath. I was in bad shape and, well, I passed out. No, you idiot! I just said I never saw him again, didn't I?
I have a confession to make. I am a fraud. Despite making my whole Fallout DLC series, playing at least 1,000 hours across Fallout 3, New Vegas, and even Fallout 76 for Christ's sake, and having Fallout New Vegas easily in my top 5 games of all time, I still have not beaten the original Fallouts. So in light of this, I'll be turning in my Fallout fan card, and I'll be going into a self-imposed exile in the desolate California desert, until I can pay my due respects to these original games and beat them through. Okay, done. And after about 40 hours or so, I'm back, and I've completed Fallout 1 and 2, and now I'm a little mad at myself for not completing these games sooner, but I'll get into that soon, as we got to establish some historical context for these games, which I promise is pretty interesting. Also, this video will be covering the first Fallout game only. Fallout 2 will have its own video, and soon, I promise. But Fallout, which is now a world-famous, multi-million, maybe even billion-dollar IP at this point, all started as a small passion project made solely by programmer turned YouTuber Tim Kaine, who was employed at Interplay Entertainment, the minds behind games like the Bard's Tale series and Mario Teaches Typing. So it's kind of funny that this thing and Fallout came from the same place. Tim was building his game as part of his new isometric engine, which was designed around the GURPS, or Generic Universal Role-Playing System, and the project was coming along well. And soon, Fergus Urquhart, the guy who would later go on to found Obsidian Entertainment, gave Tim Kaine even more resources and manpower to help bring his game to life. And Kaine's idea was to make a computer role-playing game that explored the morality and stories of a world that got its shit rocked by nuclear war, running with the working title of Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear role-playing game, which was thankfully just trimmed down to Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, because Vault 13, insert subtitle here, hits nowhere near as hard as just Fallout. However, despite a motivated team with a killer idea, the game had a bit of a turbulent development, mostly due to the generally chaotic environment of working at Interplay, which seemed to have a sort of fuck it we ball approach to game dev, based on the dev's own words. And also during development, Fallout lost its GURPS license because the creator of GURPS, Steve Jackson, was appalled at how violent and gory Fallout was. Notably the cutscene of 2 power-armored soldiers executing a prisoner that you see in like the first minute of booting the game up. So it's kind of wild looking back and seeing that this amount of violence was considered highly controversial for the industry at the time. I mean, put Doom Eternal in front of Steve Jackson's face, I think he might have a heart attack. But anyway, despite losing the GURPS license, the team was undeterred, and this loss was actually a bit of a blessing in disguise for the Fallout franchise, as the team instead made the slightly derivative, but now iconic special system for Fallout instead. And the rest is, well, you know. But now, we can finally talk about the game itself, and see if Fallout still holds up in a world where we have a live service MMO in its name. Fallout starts with a cartoon of its now iconic Vault Boy getting sealed into Vault 13, and we then see an old-timey looking ad to reserve a spot in the vault. We then cut away to raw war footage of 2 power-armored soldiers brutally executing a bound Canadian rebel, who then laugh and wave at the camera. And we then see a power armor helmet in front of a waving flag with 14 stars on it. Wait, hold on. Power armor, war in Canada, 14-star flag? This isn't your dad's America. So let me explain. The world of Fallout takes place in a fictional alternate history timeline that differs wildly from our own, and there's no one main convergence point. But one of the biggest differences is that the invention of the transistor and the miniaturization of electronics never really happened, so computer technology stayed pretty much the same since the Cold War era. Massive, cabinet-sized computers are the norm, cars maintain a space-age retro-futuristic design, and the TV sets still look like those manual, clunky-ass CRT boxes you find in your parents' basement collecting dust, that can still only display black and white images. Technological advancements were instead made in the robotics and nuclear power sectors, like robots like the Mr. Handys, Robo-Brains, Protectrons, and more. And we even see an ad for Mr. Handy bots. And all these bots have pretty robust AI systems that almost match human intelligence. And most bots are powered by nuclear fusion, which by 2077 became a pretty widespread form of energy. Energy weapons were powered by microfusion cells, power armor uses fusion cores, and nuclear reactors were all over the place. And even cars were powered by cold fusion and filled up with coolant instead of gas at the station, because it was cheaper than the ridiculously expensive oil prices. The American flag also only displays 14 stars, because in the Fallout universe, the 50 states were grouped into 13 commonwealths for more efficient top-down governance. But the commonwealth system isn't really explained in Fallout 1 or 2, nor is it particularly relevant for these games either. either. It's just mostly there to show how different this America is to our own. Obsidian developer Josh Sawyer also made a map of the Commonwealths, but it's a bit goofy. The Texas Commonwealth has an Arkansas-sized tumor. But anyway, alongside this technological diversion, America also entered a sort of cultural stasis, where the country looked like a high-tech 1950s version of America well into the 2050s. Men in their casual suits and fedora hats, women in their colorful vintage dresses and 1950s hairstyles, which is perfectly encapsulated by this Vault-Tec ad, which in this game is sometimes spelled as Vault-Tec, with a K and no T. We also hear the 1940s smash hit song Maybe by the Ink Spots, really cementing this vintage feel, along with setting an amazingly dour and unsettling tone. But this doesn't mean that Fallout is a complete retro future wonderland like the later games would have you believe, as when we zoom out of the TV we're watching, we see a massive destroyed city in the background, rusted, splintered and burned from nuclear hellfire. And what do you notice about this city? Maybe the distinct lack of color beyond poop brown and corpse gray? Or maybe the massive monolithic buildings? Or what about that imposing statue of a naked man protruding out of the tallest building's wall, to name a few off the bat? Something that always never sat right with me from Fallout 4 and beyond was the drastic shift in art direction, as Fallout 4 really went all in on the retro futurism. It made Boston look like someone nuked the damn Jetsons or something. Colorful, rounded, sci-fi-ass buildings completely dominate the landscape, rather than the retro-futurism being a more subtle part of a nation whose ruins look dark, ancient, and imposing. And the comparison between the skyline of Boston and the intro city of Necropolis is pretty night and day. This is because despite the CRT box TVs and the 1950s style advertisements, the architecture of classic Fallout is what I describe as monolithic Art Deco. Pre-war buildings have dark colors and are usually accented with Art Deco-styled faces and figures, like at the Cathedral, which depicts a winged warrior with his arms raised to the sides above the entrance, which may be inspired by the famous Niagara Mohawk building, which is in my hometown of Syracuse, New York, or the Sierra Army Depot's imposing concrete fortress, or the Gecko power plant looking like it'd be right at home in Bioshock, or the Enclave oil rig with the massive heads on each of the platform's legs, and on the damn pipes too. They feel less like cartoon buildings that got bombed, and more like the massive ancient ruins of a long-dead civilization. And I like to think that the tribals and the survivors of the wasteland will look on these buildings like how an early Roman would look at the pyramids of Egypt, probably struck with both awe and fear at the sight of these massive husks of concrete and metal, silently judged by the stoic faces and figures forever frozen in place. And now that I've played through both classic Fallouts, I really wish Bethesda stayed with this monolithic Art Deco style. It works amazingly well to increase the series' dark aura, and the city that we're looking at is supposed to be Bakersfield, California, which looks like this in real life. These massive skyscrapers really capture the imagination, and these gargantuan buildings with carved statues and faces jutting out from the walls and pillars feels way more unsettling and fascinating than pretty much anything in 4 and beyond. But at least Fallout 3 stayed mostly true to this original Art Deco style in the DC metro area. Anyway, architecture aside, America continued on its retro-tech world until the 1950s, when the resource wars broke out in Europe and the Middle East, as oil fields dried up worldwide, throwing the globe into economic chaos, and the UN was disbanded, and some nukes were even thrown at the Middle East, leading the United States to become much more isolationist and hostile to all other nations, jealously guarding their Alaskan oil reserves, while searching for alternative energy sources and nuclear power, even annexing Mexico to shore up their resources through military force. But shit really hit the fan for the states in the 2060s, when a desperate communist China invaded and occupied Alaska so they could appropriate those greedy Americans' oil for themselves, which kicked off the Sino-American War, which would grind on for over a decade. America struggled mightily to recapture Alaska, and the war against the largest communist nation on Earth sent American culture even deeper into a massive neo-red scare. McCarthyism on steroids, baby. And all facets of life began to revolve around patriotism and fighting off communism, the culture and conflict morphing the American government into a hyper-nationalist authoritarian regime, an oligarchy of military officials, scientists, politicians, and businessmen began to form, and created a deep state that the wasteland would have to reckon with. But later on, not now. But not only was an existential war for the Earth's ever-dwindling resources going on, but a mysterious and highly infectious plague, known only as the New Plague, began ravaging the nation, which led to draconian quarantines and lockdowns, and riots over the plague, and food scarcity made the government even more despotic, putting down these riots with overwhelming force. And that's where that cool-ass NCR Ranger armor comes from. It's riot gear to help suppress the continuous rioting over the dire conditions on the home front. However, despite these immense challenges, America still held together, annexing Canada over the course of the war, to secure their supply lines to Alaska, and to exploit the country for mineral and lumber resources their hungry war machine always needed. And they brutally suppressed Canadian rebels and dissenters like we see in the intro, who apparently, according to lead Bethesda writer Emil Pagliarulo, the second power-armored soldier, who laughs as he watches his buddy coldly execute a Canadian rebel, and then puts another bullet in his still-twitching body, is none other than Nate, the Fallout 4 male protagonist. Yeah, John Fallout himself is a war criminal. Okay, man. Whatever. Sure. Also during the war, the United States also made immense technological advancements, like near-sentient supercomputers, highly advanced robots, and the invention of power armor. The first T-45 models proving to be successful, but still unable to break through Chinese defenses and reclaim Alaska. And it wasn't until the invention of the T-51B models of power armor that the tide really began to turn. This armor turned a common soldier into a walking tank, and the T-51s were the game changers needed to finally break through and kick the Reds out of Alaska in early 2077, like we see in Operation Anchorage, about 11 years after the initial Chinese invasion. The Alaskan liberation was a massive win for the Americans, but this victory also more or less sealed the fate of the world, as China would be pushed to the brink after losing access to the last large oil reserve on Earth. And not only that, American power-armored soldiers also had begun land invasions of China, hoping to pressure the country into ending the war, but to no avail. The Chinese refused to give up the fight and put up vicious resistance the further the Americans pushed into the mainland. And as the Great War loomed, and nuclear war seemed all but inevitable, American politicians and elites began withdrawing to bunkers, safe houses, and bases to shelter from the coming apocalypse. The President of the United States himself heading to a large oil rig in the Pacific Ocean and disappearing completely from public view. And on October 23rd, 2077, the resource wars and Sino-American wars finally came to an end, as both sides packed each other up and smoked themselves like a blunt, and the whole planet got nuked back into the Stone Age, killing most people on Earth from nuclear explosions and subsequent radioactive fallout-induced desolation. However, not everyone got spontaneously air-fried by nukes, as in the years leading up to the war, the United States government, in contract with a mysterious and powerful corporation called Vault-Tec, had begun Operation Safe House, a project to build 122 high-tech vaults, massive bunkers to house thousands of people from a nuclear apocalypse, who would then emerge after several decades to rebuild and repopulate the nation. Well, that's the idea at least. In practice, it was a bit dicier. And luckily for us, our family were one of a very small group of quote-unquote lucky survivors who had secured ourselves a place in a vault. This vault being Vault 13, a by all means typical vault located in the hills of Central California, where we have lived our whole life underground as a vault dweller, unaware of the surface world, until now. And now we have to make our character. If you played Fallout 3 or New Vegas, you'll likely already be pretty familiar with the special and Fallout leveling system. You got your classic special stats, so you have 5 points to invest with, and you can subtract from current stats to spec deeper into others. And you also got your classic skills like small guns, energy weapons, sneak, lockpick, and so on. The biggest differences here being some old school skills that were cut in later games, like the trap skill, a skill used to disarm unseen traps in levels, but there's not a ton of traps in the game. Plus, getting damaged by traps isn't a big deal at all, if you have the supplies to heal, so there's no real point in investing precious points into this skill. Same goes for the gambling skill. There's no real point in investing in it unless you really want to make some extra cash clicking on sprites of roulette tables or something. And there's Outdoorsman too, which I actually had to look up to see what it does. And apparently, it helps mitigate damage done by random map events that involve your character falling over rocks and cliffs and getting hurt by immense thirst while traveling. But I never invested anything in Outdoorsman, and these rockfall and thirst damage events were usually beyond weak, maybe 2 to 5 damage per encounter. So it's another skill that you can safely ignore. And Outdoorsman is way more useful in Fallout 2 anyway. And you also got skills that were rolled into other skills in the future, like the throwing skill, which determines how good you are at hucking throwing knives and grenades. And this skill mostly got rolled into the explosive skill in later games. And Doctor and First Aid are 2 separate skills. Doctor heals crippled limbs only, but interestingly, I can't recall a single time when any of my body parts got crippled in this game. So Doctor was mostly useless for me. And First Aid restores hit points and increases Stimpak effectiveness, and these 2 just got lumped into the medicine skill in future games. And we also got our classic optional traits too, perks that have a negative trade-off to them for even more specialized builds. Like you take the finesse trait if you're going for a critical hit reliant build, but I didn't choose any for this playthrough just to keep it as simple as possible. And for this character, Jarthur is his name by the way, we're gonna dump all our special points into agility, as agility is directly tied to your action points, and if you have 10 agility, you'll have the maximum 10 out of 10 action points, which will allow us to shoot twice per turn without having to bite the bullet on an optional trait, to make the early game real smooth, and to get the most out of each turn in this more combat-focused build. And as for skills, I tag small guns, as I'll be using small guns, which include small pistols to not so small shotguns and rifles for most of the playthrough. Big guns and energy weapons can't really be found or used until the mid to late game anyway. And my second tag is energy weapons, so I can swap to a hard-hitting plasma rifle to take on the late game enemies. Plus, agility buffs the starting levels of all weapon skills, so we're really going all in on the combat build. And my final tag is repair, as I'll need a good repair skill to solve certain situations in the best possible way. But this won't happen till later on. And it's a fairly humble build, but Jarthur here is ready to change the Wasteland forever. Now, since this is an old school styled RPG, it's very easy just to fuck up your build, or just make a plain old bad build, as you tag certain skills you'll think you'll use a lot, only to barely use said skill, wasting one of your biggest character creation steps. Or vice versa, where you completely ignore a skill you later find yourself desperately needing. And there are skill books available if you need to bump up a skill by a few points, but it won't solve any poor character building, and there's no way to respec your skills and stats, which can be very disheartening to continue playing if you spend hours playing on a build, only to realize that you hate the build and want to restart. And to make an ideal and efficient build, you do need to have some solid metagame knowledge about the game's structure, like what enemies to expect and when, what objects that need to be fixed and interacted with, and what skills satisfy the associated checks, and what stats are needed to unlock certain dialogue options and quest steps. And a brand new Fallout player has to essentially just predict the future and go off vibes based on how they think they want their character to act. And it may take you a few tries to get a build you really jive with. Definitely took me a few cracks in making characters until I got the build that I beat the game with. So if you're new to classic Fallout and not sure how to build, feel free to use Jarthur as a reference or a template. You can then level up by killing enemies, completing quest objectives, and interacting with semi-important NPCs. And each level up will give you points to level up your skills, which can be raised all the way to 200%, and your tag skills level up twice as fast. And every 3 levels, you'll be able to pick a perk to make yourself even stronger, which is all up to you as to what perks you'd like. My only recommendation is the awareness perk, as it'll allow you to mouse over enemies and see exactly how many hit points they have, making battle strategy and planning much more effective. And once our Wasteland Warrior is created, we learn from this horrifying clay golem pretending to be a human that the vault has a problem. A big one. Its water chip is busted, which manages the vault's water recycling systems, and without it, all the water will eventually turn into undrinkable shit water after around 150 days, and the entire vault would perish, and only Jarthur the Vault Dweller can venture out into the wasteland and get a replacement. And once we accept our quest, we step out of the vault and into a rat cave. Before we can actually step out into the wasteland, we gotta get our bearings first. And this rat cave is perfect for familiarizing yourself with Fallout's movement and combat mechanics. You have 2 cursor modes, Inspect and Move. And when moving, your cursor is a red hexagon that you use to command your character to move around the game's isometrical hexagon grid with. It's fine, and you can double click to sprint to save some extra travel time, which can also be turned on permanently in the options menu. But my only complaint with the movement here is that even though you can pan and look around the entire map, if you try to click on a spot to move that's too far away, your character will just refuse to move, and you're forced to click between shorter distances to traverse the maps. And you can swap cursor mode with a right click, which brings up an arrowhead cursor that you use to interact with and inspect objects. And when your character needs to interact with something, he'll do an interact jig. And try interacting with the skeleton to get some extra ammo. And pretty much all detailed information in the game is conveyed through this left side screen, which will describe things you inspect in more detail, log experience gains, as well as log battle damage and info when in combat. And although I personally think Fallout has some pretty great looking sprite art, it's still extremely limited in what it can actually show the player. So this context screen is here to pick up the slack and identify unique objects and NPCs for you. And you can tell an NPC will be at least semi-important when this screen describes their physical appearance, instead of just their NPC name. Also, throw open the menu and turn up combat speed all the way to max. It'll save you plenty of time you'd otherwise spend watching giant rats and goons slowly walk towards you. It's literally just throwing precious seconds of your life away for no reason, so crank that shit up. You also got this beast of a menu staring at you, all these buttons and boxes and numbers, but no worries. It's actually a pretty intuitive menu once you get familiar with it. The big box is your active item slot, which you equip in your inventory's 2 item slots. One slot will usually be for your main weapon, and the other you can either keep empty for when town guards yell at you to holster your weapons, or you can put context-sensitive items in there to quickly whip out and interact with the world, or put a stim pack in there for some quick mid-battle healing. And you swap between item slots by hitting that red button above the inventory button. There's a map button that brings up the auto-generated map, which is kind of useless since you can just use the mouse to pan around and see the entirety of each map that way. And the chop button brings up your character sheet, and the Pip button brings up your Pip-Boy 2000, which we can use to read notes we find, log quest steps, get a reminder on how much time is left to get the water chip, and we can also pass time and wait using the bell icon near the clock. And it's even got an OG Pip-Boy, a space elf version of the Vault Boy, who used to be the real Pip-Boy mascot, until the Vault Boy stole his job and forced him to change his identity to Vault Boy 2000. Anyway, if we stroll around the cave for a bit, we'll inevitably enter combat with a rat, which opens up the combat menu with the options of end turn and end combat buttons, opening with that classic VAT sound effect. And all the sound effects in this game are so crisp and now even iconic. It's great shit. And once in combat, you can either move, shoot, or use an item, the green dot showing how much AP you have left. And here we can finally click that massive gun button to bring up a red target, mosey on over to the poor rat you're about to drain of all its blood, and let her rip. And hopefully, if you set all your prayers to RN Jesus, you'll hit the rat. And when mousing over an enemy, you'll get a percentage chance to hit, which is based on your weapon skill and your current distance from the target enemy. And tagging the small gun skill will let us hit these rats with our 10mm pistol more often than we miss, which the game generously provides us with to start, along with 72 bullets, to keep us strapped up for a while. However, you'll still miss plenty of shots, no matter how good your skill is. And you'll still even whiff those seemingly guaranteed 95% chance to hit shots several times, because Fallout still pays homage to its tabletop roots. So there's always a chance you'll roll that critical fail natural one and just miss completely. And while in combat, by right-clicking on the big item box, you can change from normal shot mode to aim shot mode, a burst fire mode that if a weapon supports it, to a reload. And the amount of bullets left in your gun is denoted by this very thin green line parallel to the box. And always keep an eye on it. It's easier to ignore than you think. Aim shots are the proto-VATs of this game, where you can pull up a green wire mesh of the enemy and you can target certain limbs. The head, the balls, the arms and legs, and even the eyes. And they're less likely to hit and cost an extra AP point to use, but it's more likely to crit if you do hit. And these crits can be massive if landed properly, around like 3 to 5 times the normal amount of damage, and attacking certain limbs can cause the classic crippling, like shooting at the eyes can blind certain foes permanently if the shot lands, while shooting at legs can slow down and knock enemies off their feet. And it's a nice combat wager for our character. Forgo a second normal shot to try and get a massive crit by blowing a hole through the eyeballs of our enemy. But for these rats, just blast the few you run into to get your bearings, but don't get drunk on rat blood and completely clear the cave. That's just a great way to waste valuable early game ammo for minimal XP. And it's also the game subtly showing you that combat isn't the end all of Fallout. And most times, especially in the early and mid game, most combat is best left avoided if possible, unless you're very well prepared. And it's a pretty simple system, and can drag at times, especially when fighting a group of enemies and their turns just take forever. But the amazing, powerful sounding gunshot effects and the awesome death animations always make combat feel satisfying. Especially when you win a tough fight and get to loot all that sweet gear off your foes. And finally, there's the skill decks, which we can bring up by clicking the right red button, and it shows all our skills that we can use in the game world. Sneak to start, sneaking around, lockpick to attempt to pick the lock of a locked door or container, steal to pickpocket NPCs, traps to disarm traps, never touch this button, first aid to heal yourself and others, doctor to heal crippled limbs, science to interface with and get extra info from computers, and repair to fix broken objects, like pumps or generators. And the skill usages here are all classic dice rolls, and the higher your skill percent, the more likely you are to succeed in interacting with whatever it is you're doing your interact dance on. Pretty simple stuff. And unless the thing you're interacting on needs a key, or some other kind of context-sensitive item, you can just retry your skills over and over again until you either get what you want, or break the thing you're interacting with. And for this playthrough, we'll be doing a good amount of repairing, so I use this menu to bring up my yellow repair crosshair to fix or toggle any machinery in the game world most of the time. And you can also shortcut to skill selections by hitting number keys. And there's a control screen that you can pull up at any time to get a reminder if you ever forget what any of these buttons do. But once we get to the entrance, we step out into the wasteland and see the sun for the very first time in our lives, and we exit into a large grid map. We have no leads besides the location of a nearby vault, Vault 15, so we hit that V15 button and start moving due east, time passing quickly as we travel over the squares. And the initial time crunch of 150 days may seem extremely anxiety-inducing at first, and I'm personally not a fan of putting hard deadlines on players, especially in RPGs that encourage players to interact with side content and to fully explore like this game. But don't worry about it much, we got plenty of time. And getting the water chip isn't as time consuming as you might expect. And along the way, a red crosshair representing us may turn into a sudden bolt of lightning. Random encounter time. And you can run into merchants, hostile mutant or raider gang squads, random vagrants with mostly useless information and trading stock, and more. And it all depends on where on the map you are. If you're closer to Necropolis, you're more likely to run into vagrant ghouls. Closer to the military base, you'll likely hit mutant patrols who will absolutely tear your nuts off and force feed them to you. But if you're lucky, you may stumble across a fun Easter egg or two, like a herd of talking Brahmin, a massive dinosaur foot in the ground, the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and even the famous UFO, where you can find the insanely powerful alien blaster and some skeletal aliens, along with a framed photo of Elvis. What are they doing to that poor man? This makes traversal not only have some danger to each excursion, but it also makes you really consider each trip, as it burns precious days as you travel from place to place. So be sure to really maximize your activity in each location, and try to do all the side content before moving on. Also, be sure to save constantly. Save scumming is practically encouraged by the game. Save before and after traveling too, as there's no autosave feature, and you can just get really unlucky and stumble on a roving gang of mutants who will put you in the dirt, whether you like it or not. And not having already saved a load if you get bent over like this is unpleasant, to say the least. So be sure to save whenever you feel like it, and try to save before any battles you think you might get into as well, as battles just have a chance to simply not go your way, and you'll get critted for 95 damage by a thug burst firing a 10mm SMG, and it's curtains, so save. Don't forget, save. Unless you really love lighting your time on fire and doing the same things over and over again. Save. Do it. But anyway, as we travel to Vault 15, we'll come across this unknown settlement along the way, so we stop by to check it out, and we arrive at the humble village out here in the desert. We don't know it yet, but we're currently standing in the future capital of the largest post-apocalyptic society in the nation, and maybe even the world, the New California Republic, who at its peak would encompass almost all of modern-day California, from southern Oregon all the way into Baja, from the Boneyard to New Vegas. But for now, the NCR is just the humble town of Shady Sands. And we can talk to the door guards, a woman named Katrina and a man named Seth, the future first ranger of the NCR and the face on the $20 NCR bill in Fallout New Vegas. But for now, he's just a lowly doorman. We can speak to him to learn about the settlement, and Katrina is essentially a walking tutorial on how to do world interactions. From Seth, we learn that Shady Sands is a peaceful, self-sufficient town, but they have issues with rad scorpion and raider attacks, which is some typical wasteland settlement problems. And Seth points us to speak with the town's leader Aradesh for more info. So we head in, speak to this robed man, and mug jump scare. This is one of Fallout's famous talking heads, which were given to more important NPCs to deliver us a much more immersive and slightly unsettling dialogue experience. Most NPCs you talk to will just show up in the text window as they appear in game, as a faceless, voiceless sprite standing in his or her isometric prison. So when you run into a talking head with fully voiced dialogue lines, you'll know that they're an important story NPC, or will give you a quest, or quests of some kind. And the way Interplay went about making the 3D heads for the game was an interesting solution to an interesting problem. Fallout's engine isn't a 3D engine, so to make these detailed 3D looking models, Interplay had created physical clay models of heads, which were then scanned into 3D models, cleaned up and textured, and then converted back into 2D sprites within the engine, which is some pretty interesting shit. There are 21 talking heads in the game, some looking better than others. Dudes like Decker and Gizmo are looking extra clay golem-y today. And the Interplay devs originally wanted 50 talking heads for the game, but the process to make one in-game talking head, from clay model to in-game sprite, took 8 weeks per head, so they had to cut down to 21 to actually finish the game on time. And they do look fairly uncanny, I can't lie. But I also think they have a distinct charm to them too, that ends up bolstering the post-apocalyptic setting pretty well, as these are hardened survivors who lived in a post-nuclear apocalypse desert, so they ought to look a little rugged, to say the least. We can speak to Aradesh to learn more about the rad scorpion problems, and we offer our exterminator services to him. But we'll tackle this later. For now, we go talk again to Seth, and hit the barter button to open up the trade menu. We need to trade him for his rope. We'll need it pretty soon. So I trade him a loose knife I took off old Dead Ed, and trade a few caps of difference, and I'm ready to rock. Bartering in this game is fine. You drag and drop the items you want to buy and sell, and balance out the values, and then hit the offer button. And if you pay equal or more, you're good, and you'll get better prices on purchases and sales depending on your barter skill. But unfortunately, you can't scroll through your inventory using your mouse wheel, so you gotta hit these arrow buttons to scroll, which kinda sucks. But luckily, Fallout 2 fixes this issue amazingly. However, if you're trading in pure caps, it's incredibly tedious to do, as there's usually a few hundred caps difference when trading items, and you have to either hold down the how many button until it reaches the amount you want, which moves very, very slowly by the way, or you'll be forced to button mash a few hundred times to even out the cap balance, to make sure you aren't actively losing money on trades. Wait, you can type in the cap value? God damn it. But once we barter for our rope, we move on to the nearby Vault 15, which is under this decrepit shack, and is old and abandoned, full of rats and mole rats. But that's nothing we can't handle with our trusty 10mm. And Vault 15 is where the settlers of Shady Sands originated from, which was a slightly less sadistic vault than most others, thankfully. Its experiment was to place dwellers with radically different political beliefs all together into a single vault, to see what would happen. It's kind of like a vault version of Zitter.com, which predictably caused a schism and mass exodus from the vault in 2097, where all of the dwellers just up and left the vault, half of them going on to found vicious raider gangs like the Vipers, Jackals, and Khans. And fun fact, the Vipers were originally supposed to be in Fallout 1, who were a group of stealth-focused raiders who worshipped the snake god and would throw you in a snake pit as a trial. Whereas the other half of the vault, the seemingly less murderous and thieving dwellers, founded the humble settlement of Shady Sands, with help from the vault's Gek to jumpstart their farming systems. And the vault was then left abandoned after the Exodus, and has been left to rust ever since. And we can also grab some good loot here in Vault 15. Don't miss those wall safes and lockers. And here's where we need to use our rope, as the vault elevator is just gone. So we gotta fireman ourselves down. So equip the rope in an item slot, and click it to bring up a yellow crosshair, and then just click the busted elevator to tie our rope down, and we then can explore the rest of the vault. And we get another rope, and a very Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior looking leather jacket armor set, and we rappel down to the final level, blast some gigantic rats, and if we walk towards this collapsed corridor in the bottom right corner, we'll get a message in our status window that the control room is collapsed, and there's no chance that there's a working water chip down here. Shit, Vault 15 was a bust, but it's okay, because we can still leave Vault 15 with a solid sack of gear, some dynamite, some grenades, some 44 and 10mm ammo, and a nice 10mm SMG, and that burst is filthy. But once done at Vault 15, we run back to Shady Sands to barter away my loose flares and other gear so I can scrounge up 100 caps for a very important man. This biker thug looking dude named Ian, a former caravan guard, who will accompany us as a loyal companion, who will put his life on the line and obey all of our commands without hesitation for a modest one-time hiring cost of 100 caps. And Ian is likely the first companion you'll pick up, and recruiting companions is incredibly important to success in classic Fallout, as although you can't control them directly, each companion is essentially an extra attack turn for you, and there are 3 companions, and a dog, that you can recruit to help you fight in Fallout 1. And if you recruit them all, you can assemble a solid goon squad that only late-game mutant hordes can go toe-to-toe with. And the only downside is you have to supply your companions with weapons and ammo on your own, otherwise all they can do is throw hands with the demons of the wastelands, with little success. So it's a solid money sink to keep your guys equipped. Also, when there's a lot of characters in a battle, your companions will likely often end up shooting each other on accident, which can occur when a friendly is standing in the firing line of another. So you always gotta take positioning into account lest you blow a cannonball-sized hole in Ian's chest when you're trying to shoot an enemy, or vice versa. These guys can have some real dog aim at times. You can only command your companions to either stick close or keep a distance from you, and the rest is a total crapshoot at the mercy of the RPG dice gods. So save before any battle, like I said. Also, you know that classic Bethesda moment when your companion just stands in a doorway, completely blocking you as you rub your smelly balls in their face as you try to sprint and jump into their model in a desperate attempt to make them move? Well, that Fallout series tradition got its start here, as companions can easily block your path, as you can't walk on the hex tile that they're currently standing on, so my allies were door-stucking me a bit more than I would have liked. And I don't know why companions can't just be intangible when outside of combat to make traversal so much smoother, but whatever, it's a feature. So we use Ian's help to clear out the Rad Scorpion cave that's been given Shady Sands hell, Ian's extra firepower making it so much easier to deal with them and clear the whole place out. Also, if you need a heal from the vicious scorpion and fat rat combat we've been engaging in so far, unless you're in combat, don't stimpack heal from an item slot, that's just wasting time. Instead, pop open the inventory, switch to the inspect cursor arrow, and then hold down click on your stimpack, which will open up an item drop-down menu, and select the open hand icon to use the stimpack right out of your inventory instantly. Otherwise, you have to drag the stimpack into your item slot, equip it, click the box, and then use it on yourself, and do a jig to actually apply it. And if you want to heal that way again, you have to re-equip a stim pack from your inventory, as the stim pack excuses itself from your item slot on use, even when you have extra stimmies in your inventory. So just use the context menu outside of combat. But with the rad scorpions exterminated and Eridash cheesin', we move on to the nearby settlement of Junktown, which we learn the location from by asking the Shady Sanders what's going on in the area, and we stop it. Shady Sands was still a bit of a tutorial town though, getting you familiar with the dialogue, settlement, side questing, and bartering systems with little in the way of real choices in role-playing to do, besides kill the scorpions, or don't kill them, and be nice to Eridash, or be mean to Eridash. But now at Junktown, we can finally stretch our legs and make some real big boy choices. Junktown, as the name suggests, is a town made of junk, haphazardly thrown together sheet metal houses, and the town's wall is made of stacked up and rusted out cars. And it's all very Mad Max-esque, and the town is run by the mayor and owner of the general store, Killian Darkwater, who looks ripped right out of Beyond Thunderdome or something. But he's a pretty classy guy to talk to, and he's got a good amount of stock and caps for an early game merchant, and I purchased a nice new Desert Eagle off of him. And once we finish with Killian, this red-shirted goon named Kenji walks in, shouts that Gizmo sends his regards, and then tries to gun Killian down, weirdly unafraid of Killian's 3 guards, plus me and Ian. So it goes about as well as you expect from him. And Killian will then recruit us to help take down Gizmo, the owner of Junktown's casino. But despite the assassin clearly saying it was Gizmo who sent him, Killian needs proof from the horse's mouth to be willing to attack Gizmo, and he gives us a wire bug to get Gizmo on tape confessing to putting a hit on him. And we then meet Gizmo at his casino, but before we enter, we can see a dog wandering around outside, and when you approach him, he'll automatically think you're his owner if you're wearing a leather jacket, which we got in Vault 15, which is another Mad Max reference. So we welcome Dog Meat into our goon squad, and he's a really solid early and mid-game companion who can bite enemies up to 4 times per turn, and he has pretty great movement range. However, he's absolutely useless in the late game. He can't punch through strong enemy armor and gets eviscerated by all heavy weapons and energy weapons. And companions just love shooting the poor dog in combat with those oops misfires. We can also pick up our 3rd companion at the Scum Pit near Gizmo's. In game, he's wearing some leather armor, but in the lore, he's supposed to be wearing veteran Ranger riot gear armor. And this is Tycho, a desert ranger from Nevada, the future elite military branch of the NCR. That big junk statue in New Vegas is the Nevada Rangers uniting with the NCR against the Legion. And when we tell him that we're helping Killian expose and kill Gizmo, he says, "Yo, real shit?" And he joins up free of charge, as long as you side with Killian against Gizmo. And we then can speak to Gizmo himself, the fattest wastelander you'll ever see. And he's so large, he's permanently fused to his desk. Iguana bits can't be that good, bro. He initially denies sending a hitman.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But we can smooth talk him into convincing him that we'd be a better assassin, which he agrees to. This being one of the game's first speech checks. Speech is pretty robust in the classic Fallout games, and it's much more unapparent than in later games. In games like New Vegas, it'll always let you know when there's a speech check available, and it'll even let you know if you'll pass it or not, based on your speech skill. But classic Fallout is much more obscure with it, as the game won't directly show you what text options or speech checks. You kinda have to intuit it out for yourself. And not only that, but some text options and speech checks won't even be available to you, unless your intelligence stat is high enough, as your intelligence also changes what text options are available. And that's where we get the low intelligence meme build runs, where you go around talking like a caveman with CTE and all the dialogue options.
You found the chip? Oh, that's great. Can I have the chip, please? No, not that. I want the computer chip. No, the chip. Just give me the chip!
So if you want to talk your way through preventing a genocide, make sure to dump into intelligence, not charisma, ironically enough. But despite my extremely pedestrian speech skills, we convinced Gizmo we'd make a great assassin anyway. And it makes sense that we were able to convince him too. The last guy he hired's plan was to waltz into a 1v6 gunfight and expose the man who hired him to his victim. Gizmo isn't the greatest judge of competence. You can then bring this evidence to Killian, or actually follow through and kill him for Gizmo. But let's keep our goody two-shoes on and give Killian the evidence. So we rally the Junktown guards, teleport to the casino, and completely gank Gizmo and his armored goon. Killian giving us 500 caps as a reward, and we complete our first real quest. And it's a great little microcosm of what makes Fallout so great. You can even go rogue and just execute Gizmo with no proof, which will make all the guards tell you to leave and not come back. Although they seem not to care if I'm around or not. Also, before you go, if you did the quest with Killian, you'll be teleported out of the casino once Gizmo has his chest cavity opened. So be sure to run back and loot his body. You can get a sweet rare Mauser pistol, which isn't very powerful, but will fetch you a nice sack of caps when trading. And next up, we head to the hub, a trading hub. Get it? A center map settlement where most of the caravan companies operate out of, which has plenty of great traders, like Jake the arms dealer, the bookseller lady who can improve your non-tag skills in a pinch, a drug dealer where you can pick up some Rad-X, and the dwarf general store owner. And these dwarf guys are often merchants in the classic Fallouts. However, dwarves seem to have vanished completely from the Fallout franchise after Fallout 2. A little weird. Where'd they go? Also, the water merchants are in the southern part of town, and there's no water chip to be found in the hub, but we can hire the merchants for 1,000 caps, who will send a water caravan to Vault 13, which will add 100 extra days to your water chip hunt, which is a solid 66% increase to your deadline. But this shit is a scam, and won't be necessary at all. Jarthur is making great time, actually. Anyway, when we entered, we noticed a large amount of caravans just sitting around at the city gates, and we learned that caravans have been going missing more and more often as of late. The locals and caravaneers are unsure as to what's going on and who's raiding the caravans, but it's creating a deep sense of paranoia in the hub. In the hub, there's an ongoing conflict between the hub police and a crime lord named Decker who you can work for as a hitman, or work to arrest with the hub fuzz. And we also learned at the Fargo Trading Company, a small reference to Interplay head Brian Fargo, when we talked to their unfortunate looking boss. We learn about how Wastelanders have been reporting sightings of a damn mythological creature, the Death Claw, a powerful mutant lizard of some kind with large knife-like claws that can cut men to ribbons, and apparently, the Death Claw can even hypnotize a man just by looking at him. Somehow. Sounds like some stinky BS to me. And we can also run into this ghoul living in a shotgun shack. And this is Harold, a kindly old man who looks like mutated swamp algae. And another thing I miss from these old Fallout games, alongside the dark and imposing architecture, is how fucked up and inhuman the ghouls looked. Ghouls are humans who have been exposed to far too much radiation, but instead of growing a golf ball-sized tumor in their nutsack and promptly keeling over and dying, the ghouls' bodies somehow adapted to the radiation, and instead became nourished by it, allowing their lives to be extended to an unnaturally long degree. However, this radioactive immortality comes with some serious drawbacks, as ghouls always run the risk of having their minds rotted and going feral, becoming pretty much radiation zombies at that point, and their bodies also start to fall apart. All their cartilage-based extremities are completely gone, and their skin starts peeling off in huge chunks. But in modern-day Fallout games, ghouls look pretty alright, all things considered. They don't got ears or noses, but their skin is all there. They just look like they got their DNA spliced with some beef jerky. Hell, most ghouls still even got full heads of hair these days. But in classic Fallout, the ghouls look like honest-to-God walking corpses. Harold's skin here is puke green, his skin is literally sagging off his face, revealing his skull in parts. And you can even see his ribs, arm, and shoulder bones jutting out from loose flaps of skin, or just completely exposed. The dude looks hollowed out, making you wonder how he's even still alive. And it makes the mostly normal Wastelanders' ghoul prejudices make even more sense, because imagine seeing this thing walk towards you and start talking to you like he's your friendly uncle. And it's not just the ghouls, but the other mutants in this game are also pretty sickening and unnatural in their designs, like the centaurs, who in the 3D Fallout games is this reddish hentai beast. But in the 2D Fallout games, they're a flesh amalgamation of what looks like a human and a dog, both having a human and dog head, 6 human arm-like appendages for legs, and this nasty-ass goatsy situation coming out of their behinds. And on closer inspection, we can see that this blood poop is actually alive. It's a mass of writhing flesh tentacles that slithers on the ground beneath its body. What the fuck? And there's also the floaters. Mutated worms? Well, I think they're worms at least. It looks more like a mutant alien toilet seat that has an inexplicably large and floating head with dripping flesh bulbs that look like, well, you know. Apparently, the artist at Interplay who designed the floater, Jason Anderson, said they called the floater the, quote, sphincter monster because he, quote, used a porn image for its mouth. Nasty ass bastard. But despite how fucking gross and alien they look, I actually really like these old designs, and they really show off how mutagenic and nasty FEV exposure is supposed to be. And we'll see even nastier FEV mutations later on. Well, for now, we can slide Harold a few caps for his troubles, and he can tell us a pretty interesting story about how he got turned into a green swamp zombie. Harold here was born 5 years before the Great War of 2077, making him 89 years old at Fallout 1. Harold was lucky enough to get into a vault when the bombs dropped, which according to the semi-canonical Fallout Bible written by Black Isle and legendary Fallout writer Chris Avallone, was Vault 29, a vault that only housed children and teenagers 15 years old or younger, and vault life was tough, but stable, and Harold emerged in 2090, where he became a prominent wasteland trader. However, trade soon became tough when Harold's caravans kept getting attacked in force by mutants, making business pretty hard.
Didn't. Got killed. Love that joke.
Until he met a wasteland doctor named Richard Gray, who claimed to know where these mutants were coming from, and led an expedition to an old military base to the northwest. And sure enough, the military base was swarming with mutants, making Harold believe that it was some kind of mutant factory.
Because it was like someone went bargain shopping at Mutant Land. Phew, cheaper by the dozens. Can't figure any other reason except that being the factory.
The expedition squad then fought their way into the base, losing people to the mutants and deadly security systems until only Harold and Richard made it to the core of the base, which contained huge vats of some unknown liquid. A robotic crane then smashed into Richard Gray, sending him flying into a vat, while Harold passed out from his injuries. Harold then somehow woke back up in the wasteland, mostly unharmed, but Richard Gray was gone, and Harold began decaying into his ghoulish form shortly afterward, and made his way back to the hub to spend his days as a downtrodden beggar. Very interesting story. I wonder if this will be important later. But anyway, for the last of our hub exploration, we can come across this building that seems to have been converted into some kind of religious chapel. Worshippers splayed out on the ground moaning about something called the Holy Flame, in some kind of haze. And we speak to the head priestess here, Jane, to learn about this odd religion. But outside of learning that they're called the Children of the Cathedral, Jane is pretty vague about their actual beliefs, and what the Holy Flame is even supposed to be. But if you use the Tell Me About button, a special Fallout 1 only mechanic where you could type in certain words for yourself to ask about some hidden or obscure topics, which I never really used. It's pretty useless once you have a little bit of metagame knowledge, and the extra info isn't all that helpful most of the time. But if we ask her about, quote, mutants, she says that they're considered holy in their religion. If you ask about the Master, she says that the Holy Flame is their master, implying it to be a person, rather than some kind of spiritual force. And if you mention the Unity, she says that the Holy Flame will unite all races and purge any non-believers, which sounds incredibly sinister. So these Children of the Cathedral aren't to be trusted for now. But once done at the hub, we can next go to Necropolis, which isn't too far from the hub. We arrive at a decrepit motel, which has ghouls all over it. Also, I want to take a sec here to discuss the music of the game, as I've completely neglected it until now. Classic Fallout's music really bolsters the dark atmosphere of the world. Tracks like City of the Dead here really instill a sense of dread and death in the players. This loud buzzing sound in the track evoking a swarm of flies, feeding on the death of the place. And other tracks like Metallic Monks and the Brotherhood Bunker are also great. Sounds of distant air raid sirens are paired with ominous moan sounds and noises from machinery. And the main Wasteland theme is genuinely anxiety-inducing. And Vats of Goo is an iconic track. And many other tracks just feel incredibly ominous and forlorn, and it's really great shit. And my only issue with the music is that there's only one song per level, and the song will restart when entering a new zone in the area. And the songs themselves aren't too long, so they can start to feel a little bit repetitive if you're exploring in the same area long enough. But anyway, we can blast some feral ghouls standing around in groups outside, but we gotta get underground to progress forward. But while in the sewers though, we run into some friendly homeless ghouls who ask us for some help. From the ghouls, we learn that their leader is a guy named Set, who sent them into the sewers for not being thuggish enough, but he still gives them the water they need to live, as despite ghouls being able to feed off radiation, they still need basic human needs like water to stay alive. And we also learn that Necropolis is on top of another vault, Vault 12, which has a functioning water chip. Also, it's not explained in the game, but Vault 12 is the reason why there's so many ghouls living here, as the vault's door was designed to not seal properly, exposing the dwellers to huge radiation leaks so the effects could be studied, and those who survived became ghoulified and formed a community around Set's leadership. But sweet! Quicker to find the water chip than I thought too. However, there's a slight nuance. If we just nick the water chip out of the vault and run, we condemn the ghouls to die a slow and thirsty death. However, they also have a watershed with a pump that can pump up groundwater for the ghouls to drink instead, and irradiated groundwater is no problem for these guys, but it's currently broken and not pumping up water, so the ghouls need their water chip. We also speak to the ghoul leader Set, looking just as grotesque as Harold, who asks us to kill the super mutants who are currently occupying the watershed, who had invaded Necropolis in search of their vault. Also, Set constantly refers to us as a normie, and I guess the devs hadn't come up with the term smooth skin yet, so Set kinda talks to you like he's a 4chan poster from 2016.
Better be a killer reason for standing in my shadow. Does next on the menu ring a bell for ya, normie?
And also, Set and his ghouls are cannibals who aren't above eating humans, as he threatens to put us on the menu if we don't comply with him. He's a pretty interesting guy. He's not exactly feral, but he's still monstrous enough to not have any problems with eating humans. And we soon find the mutants in question at the watershed, and this will likely be the first time players ever see these rumored super mutants in the flesh. On the overworld, they look like hulks, massive green muscular humans that strike an imposing image, easily twice the size of puny Jarthur here. And we speak to the one who looks like he's wearing a full kit of Rick Owens or something. And this is Harry, whose head is a sight to behold. He's got a chin the size of Nevada, and he needs straps to keep his upper lips lifted up so he can speak, which he isn't very good at.
You not ghoul, I knew, not fool Harry.
He looks powerful, yet grotesque, and I like this massive brick-headed mutant design more than, say, the cheese mutants from Fallout 3, or the lumpy Shreks from 4 and beyond. But be careful, because if you tell Harry to take you to the loo, you'll be instantly teleported from Necropolis to the bowels of the Mariposa military base, a very late-game area to meet the super mutant lieutenant, a highly intelligent cyborg super mutant with a British accent.
Oh, this is excellent. You know, I actually doubted my officers when they said they'd captured a prime normal.
Who at this point in the game will either kill you for refusing to join the Unity, or if you agree with him, will dunk a mummified version of your dweller into an FEV vat in a bad ending sequence. So be careful and probably drop a save before you deal with Harry. If your speech is up to the task, you can smooth talk Harry to access the watershed without a fight.
Robot.
But he's not as dumb as he looks or sounds apparently, and he isn't easy to convince. He wasn't buying what I was selling with that dollar store speech skill. But otherwise, it's drill time. And it's the game's first real big combat challenge if you go this route, as Harry is equipped with a laser rifle, which can shred your pathetic armor and can bisect you easily if it hits. But luckily, Harry isn't the Chris Kyle of super mutants, and with Tycho, Dogmeat, Ian, and a little bit of luck, we can waste Harry and isolate and kill the remaining super mutants to clear the watershed of these green men. And here's where my repair tech comes into play. The water pump is this big doohickey in the corner of the shed, and with some junk parts found on the ground in the sewers, we can use the parts on the pump and repair it real quick, and bing boodoo bop, these ghouls will never go thirsty again. And we can now head down into Vault 12 and take the water chip with no issues from the glowing ones working down in the vault, besides these 2 doormen who picked a bad day to go to work. Sweet! Our quest is nearly complete. Time to head home. Also, side note, make sure you have all your business settled with Necropolis before you leave, because if you re-enter the city anytime after 110 in-game days, it'll be attacked by the mutant army, who will completely destroy the settlement and its residents. So if you want the good ending for these ghouls, just never go back there. Anyway, we return to the vault in our Cro-Magnon Man Overseer, who plugs in the chip and it works like a charm. But after we report our quest log in the vault's library, the Overseer becomes disturbed by what we saw. He says that based on our reports, the amount of super mutants appearing in the wasteland can't be natural, and someone must be making the mutants somehow, and this must be stopped, or else the mutants will eventually find and destroy Vault 13, as vaults are high-value targets for the mutants, as dwellers and their mostly uncorrupted DNA make for the best FEV test subjects, and the wasteland as a whole could be destroyed by this expanding mutant threat. So once more into the breach, my friend. But to take on these mutants, we're going to need some serious firepower and protection. So from Vault 13, we'll head southwest until we come upon a small bunker with some big armored Buzz Lightyear looking dudes outside standing guard, and we can talk to the powerfully enschozzed doorman Cabot.
Hello and welcome to the Brotherhood of Steel.
May I ask your business here?
And learn that this is the home base of the Brotherhood of Steel, a technologically advanced and highly militaristic faction that exists to hoard, study, and develop new weapons and technology, and to keep it out of the grubby hands of those unwashed wastelanders, who will surely use it for no good. And the Brotherhood of Steel was founded after General Roger Maxson, a US military commander stationed at the Mariposa military base, had learned that the government was doing human experiments for an experimental virus called FEV. And outraged at the human lives lost at the hands of government experimentation, Maxson executed the scientists, revolted against the US military, and took control of the base, establishing a chain of command with him as the leader of this rebel military squad. The Great War then occurred, which forced Maxson and his men to leave Mariposa and then travel to where they are now at the Lost Hills Bunker, where they have remained since, developing their brotherhood into the quasi-religious military that we see today. We asked Cabot if we can join the notoriously reclusive Brotherhood, and he says that the Elder will let us join if we do a quest for him. We must head to a place called the Ancient Order and retrieve proof that we were there. Sounds easy enough. But the other doorman says, "Oh man, they're sending you out on the Glow quest, huh?" And when we talk to him, he flat out says that the quest is a fool's errand given to annoying Brotherhood wannabes, just so that they can get rid of them, sending them to go die in a massive cancer hole. So, okay, maybe this won't be so easy, but we need to penetrate this bunker by any means. So we accept the quest and head to the bottom right quadrant of the map, and we enter the Glow. And the Glow is a very interesting place. It's immediately striking. The massive hole and the charred bodies instantly spike your nerves, which isn't helped by the status screen saying that you're getting your ass fried by large doses of radiation, as the Glow is the only place in the entire game where radiation comes into play, and if you waltz up to the ominous hole unprotected, you'll leave the place puking up blood, your hair falling out in clumps, and your skin melting off, like after a night at Marjorie Taylor Greene's house. And if you take on too many rads, you'll automatically die from radiation poisoning after a short time traveling, so you need to be prepared. But luckily, it's very simple to prep for this massive glowing cancer pit. Just buy or find 2 Rad-X pills and just eat them both before entering the Glow, as it'll set your radiation resistance to 100%, making you fully immune to all radiation for 24 hours, which is plenty of time to completely scour the Glow. And don't worry about giving your companions any pills either. They're completely immune to any and all radiation, like they got lead skin and silicon organs. And you also need 1 extra rope to rappel down into the Glow from a jutting beam. So 2 Rad-X pills and 1 rope is what you need. And it's very annoying to travel all the way to the Glow, realize you forgot a rope, and have to waste several minutes backtracking, which is not ideal. And it's kind of weird how much of an afterthought radiation mechanics are in a post-nuclear apocalypse game. It only occurs in one place, and there's an incredibly simple solution to just completely negate any rad effects and completely negate the entire system. But the Glow itself is still a pretty cool dungeon overall. For the Brotherhood quest, all we need to do is loot the dead paladin on the first level and grab a holotape off of him to get us into the Brotherhood. But you'll definitely want to clear the entire Glow out, as the bottom levels not only have some of the best loot in the game, but also have some very interesting lore to find. And to get to the bottom, you need to pick up keycards off corpses to open up electrified elevator doors to reach the lower levels. And you'll see these deactivated robo-brains and security bots, so be sure to spawn camp them for some easy XP, and so they won't be a pain in the ass later on. And also in the lower levels, there's a massive supercomputer called Zax 1.2, the result of a pre-war scientist's attempts to make a true artificial intelligence, and we can speak to it and learn that the Glow is actually the ruins of the West Tech research facility. West Tech being a defense contractor a la Lockheed Martin, if Lockheed Martin also made mutant goo and suits of power armor. And this facility specifically was created to develop something called the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or more commonly known as FEV, as part of the Pan-Immunity Virion Project, a government project to develop a sort of miracle virus that could make humans immune to not only the new plague that was ravaging the country, but Chinese bioweapon technology as well. You can also try to beat Zax at chess, which was supposed to be possible to win if you had 10 intelligence, but the devs kind of fucked up the game logic that checks the player's intelligence score, and Zax is completely unbeatable. But based on the research notes that we find in the facility, FEV research wasn't able to achieve their desired immunity without some meaty side effects, and animals that were tested on grew massively in size and strength, and the researchers at West Tech strongly advised against human experimentation, as it would very likely result in some unforeseen consequences. And FEV research was then moved to the Mariposa military base in early 2077, where they made the massive green goo vats in the basement. And once we repair the generator with my repair skills, and get the power back on, and get past a tough fight against 3 RoboBrain guards, we can finally access the testing areas, where there's a huge line of wall safes and lockers full of some of the strongest weapons in the game. Combat armor, miniguns, and the sexy, sexy plasma rifle are all available to scoop up, but all I really need is the plasma rifle. Now I can finally switch over to energy weapons, which I tagged at the beginning of the game to get my shooting skills up to speed real fast when I got to this point. And once the glow is cleared, we need to get our hands on some power armor, which we can do at the Brotherhood by either 1. Doing a quest to rescue an initiate from the hub, who is being held by some suspiciously strong thugs in a house near where Harold lives. And if you blast the thugs and rescue him, you'll be allowed to requisition some power armor as a reward. Or 2, if you head to the 3rd floor and talk to the guy near this power armor workbench. He says he'll let you repair and use the power armor for yourself if you get him a systolic motivator from Michael the Quartermaster, who we can smooth talk into giving us one, as long as you don't mention the guy we talked to. Kyle is his name, by the way. And once that's done, I use my juiced up repair skill and make myself a sweet set of power armor, which weighs a shit ton. So use the lockers in the room to store your items and make room for your new suit. And the power armor really does make you feel, well, powerful. Just look at how goddamn thick those cheeks are. That's some omni booty right there. And the power armor lives up to its name, and it really does feel powerful. It raises your strength by 3 points by just wearing it, and its high armor class makes all those small gun toting thugs who have been giving us hell this whole game now only able to pathetically shoot us for minimal to no damage at all, who I then melt them down to their bones with my plasma rifle. And it's such an amazing feeling. Getting this better gear does make you look and feel way stronger than when you started, which was incredibly satisfying. Love it. And also while we're here, we can go talk to the Elder, John Maxon. John Brotherhood of Steel here is just a white Aradesh, funnily enough. And it's a shame that these clones' respective factions went to war with each other later on. And Elder John is a pretty nonchalant guy as far as Brotherhood members go. He's a little bit impatient, but otherwise seems like a pretty down-to-earth and funny guy.
Well, you see, there's 4 of them. And that's about all they can ever agree on. They can't even agree if they want to piss, much less pick a pot to piss in.
We can ask him if he knows anything about the missing caravans, which he says he doesn't know anything about. But he also says that he sent Brotherhood scouts to the north and south, the ones who went north never returning. So we volunteer to scout to the north and try to see what fate may have befallen them. And if we head northwest a bit and avoid any mutant gang squads, we can find the Mariposa military base entrance, which has several mutants outside guarding it. So it looks like we found our mutant factory in question. So we can return with this info and report to Maxon and tell him that we can't wait for the mutants to come and attack, as they'd wipe out anyone who stands against them at full strength. So we convince Maxon and the rarely seen Brotherhood of Steel Elder Council that we need to spank these mutants before they spank us, and they agree to help us assault the military base with a squad of 3 Brotherhood paladins. Sweet. But for now, we'll put the military base assault on hold, as it's a very hard dungeon, and we have to visit our last major settlement, the Boneyard. But before the Boneyard, let's stop by Shady Sands again for no particular reason. But when we arrive, we learn from Seth the doorman that Aradesh's daughter, Tandy, had been abducted by the nearby Khan raiders, and Aradesh pleads with us to help Shady Sands once again and get Tandy back. So of course we oblige. And to free Tandy, we could either simply slaughter all the Khans in the area, which there are quite a few of, so it's a long ass fight. And at this point, it's more about making sure my shit-headed companions don't get themselves killed, rather than any actual danger to Jarthur himself. And these Khans can't touch this metal cake. But if you don't feel like committing mass slaughter, you can also buy Tandy's freedom and make a deal with their edgy as fuck leader, Garl Deathhand, where we can barter for Tandy's disembodied head for a modest price, which is way easier than going all Ghost of Tsushima on some Khans. Or you can 1v1 Garl in a boxing match for Tandy's freedom, but unless you're invested heavily into unarmed, this may take a while. But crisping these dudes with my plasma rifle was simply too fun. And I always make sure to do the Shady Sands quest to make sure that the NCR comes into existence. It's one of my favorite factions in any game of all time. But with that done, we can now head to the Boneyard for real. And the Boneyard is the Wastelanders' common name for the city of Los Angeles, which has been reduced to a massive sprawling ruin that seems to go on forever, the bones of the dead and hollowed out buildings giving it its name. We arrive in a gated community called Additone, which seems pretty alright as far as wasteland settlements go. It's a farming community led by a heavily armed police force called the Regulators, who fend off raider attacks and force Additone residents to labor away in their farms. And we can speak to the assassin in white over here to get a quest to fix the hydroponic farms of Additone. And be sure to do this quest if you're doing energy weapons like me, as he can upgrade your plasma rifle to a stronger, turbo version once you complete the quest, which does more damage and costs 1 less action point per shot, which is pretty fucking sweet. And to the north, are the Blades, a small gang of survivors who are in conflict with the Regulators. And of course, we can take sides in this conflict. We can either help Addytum destroy the Blades for being a gang of thugs, the mayor even claiming that they killed his son and put him on a spike like Vlad the Impaler. But if we talk to the Blades leader, we find that they're hardly a vicious gang, and more of a group of unwashed survivors like anyone else. The Blades leader Razor also telling us that the Regulators killed the mayor's son and are covering it up. And they want to take on the Regulators, but need weapons from the Gunrunners, who are shacked up in a warehouse fortress surrounded by a moat of dubious green goo. Probably not good for the air quality in there. And these future goated Fallout New Vegas gun merchants want to pack up and get out of their warehouse, but they're stuck here due to vicious deathclaws constantly popping up nearby that they can't seem to get rid of no matter how many they kill. And we can fight these deathclaws one map over in the Deathclaw playground, my plasma rifle doing some solid work in melting these fools. But to actually destroy the Deathclaws, we have to go down these hard to see steps and take on the Mother Deathclaw in a pretty challenging boss battle. This thing loves to knock you off your feet, which will eat up 2 action points to get your fat powered armor ass back up when your turn starts. But I take it down by doing the classic strategy of shoot and scoop. And we destroy the Mama Deathclaw and its eggs to liberate the Gunrunners, who leave behind plenty of ammo and weapons, but nothing will top this turbo plasma rifle at this point in the game. But before we leave the Boneyard, we have to check out the Boneyard Library, which is home to the Followers of the Apocalypse, a bit of an aberration in terms of Fallout factions, as instead of being a murderous raider gang, an expansionist empire, or some kind of paramilitary group with some odd beliefs, they seem to be a truly altruistic group of scholars and healers who wish to learn from the nuclear holocaust of the Great War to make sure a conflict that large never erupts again, even if their leader looks like a Mad Max biker thug who would get her car blown up while trying to rob and kill Max over 3 gallons of fuel. And this is Nicole, who leads the followers in the library here, and we can ask her about the children of the cathedral, whom she and the followers don't trust at all, and I don't blame her. Their beliefs are nebulous at best, and their general aura is beyond sinister. And Nicole tells us that they suspect that the children of the cathedral may be in league with the super mutant army, as followers spies have spotted Nightkin, special super mutants who love using stealth boy technology to turn themselves invisible, entering through a back entrance of the cathedral. She also tells us that she's got a spy in the cathedral named Laura, who we can talk to by giving her the code phrase Red Rider. So with that business taken care of, we can head to the cathedral and meet with Laura to learn what to do next. And she also provides us with a squad of follower fighters to attack the chapel if need be. Very nice. Very nice. We can also recruit the 4th and final companion at the library, a lady named Katja. She's got some stealth related skills, but at this point in the game, she was way too weak for my party, and she did not last long. But I don't move on the chapel first. I instead move to attack the Mariposa military base and destroy those vats of mutant-producing FEV goo. So I roll up to the base, and 3 Brotherhood shooters show up to help fight, and we make mincemeat out of these super mutant guards outside. And it's a pretty great time. Until it isn't. As once you get a code off a mutant guard and get inside the base, the game completely jobs you as you teleport right into a battle with 3 super mutants armed with heavy weapons right in front of you, and they get to go first. So needless to say, most of my companions did not survive this fight. I probably should have given Tycho an extra suit of power armor I got from both repairing the suit and finding the missing initiate quest, but I was too lazy to do all the inventory management. So, sorry fellas. It was very painful to watch them get blown into bloody chunks, but at least at this point, Jarthur was so powerful, companions weren't really needed anymore. Also, those bum-ass Brotherhood Knights don't follow you inside the base for some unknown reason. They show up, help with the outdoor guards only, and then refuse to do any more than that. So thanks for mostly nothing. Fucking bums. And the military base is infested with mutants, and there are these red and yellow force fields everywhere. You can walk through the red ones, but you'll take some damage while walking through them, and the yellow ones are impassable, unless you use your repair skill on the hourglass-shaped emitters on the side of the force field, which I tagged, so nice. Or, you can chuck grenades at the emitters to blow them up and bypass them, which is a bit of a more expensive option. And then I thin out the mutants with my plasma rifle and make it through the base until we gotta face off against Lou, the strongest super mutant in the game, and the Master's right-hand man. He's equipped with a Gatling laser and can easily one-shot a power-armored character if he lands his hits just right. But if you keep Lou at a distance, his Gatling laser damage drops off a cliff, and he starts hitting you for 3 to 5 points of damage instead of 20 plus. And I just lob plasma balls at Lou until his head detonates. And his unique death animation is pretty sick too. with Lou dead, we bust into the control room that's full of children of the cathedral, and if you try to interact with them, they all spontaneously combust and explode into decapitated chunks or something. I have no clue what's supposed to be happening here. We then interact with the main computer and start a classic self-destruct sequence, and I set the timer to 3 minutes and haul ass back to the surface, where a short cutscene of the vats being blown up plays, and with that, we've destroyed the Unity's ability to produce more super mutants. And now, all that's left is to head to the cathedral and destroy whoever the mutant leader is. And at the cathedral, like I mentioned earlier, has this awesome gothic art deco style that's really imposing and interesting. And inside we can find Laura and use our code word to get her to share her intel with us. And she says that she saw the children of the cathedral's leader, some dude named Morpheus, enter a secret staircase and disappear into a hidden basement. And Laura suspects that that's where the mutant master is located. So to get to the secret basement base, we'll need 2 keys from the children of the cathedral, which I'll be referring to as the cock from now on. One of which we can only get from Morpheus, and I don't feel like asking nicely. So with the followers fighters in tow, we assault the upper levels of the cathedral, kill Morpheus and his Night King guards, and swipe his keys. And killing Morpheus turns the whole cathedral against me, so I slaughter all cock in sight and use the keys to open up a false wall in the basement, which leads to a hidden underground vault. And this is the Los Angeles Demonstration Vault, a vault made to show the public what vaults and vault life would look like, which worked incredibly well. People were amazed by the vault's advanced technology and amenities, which fueled Project Safe House's development. And when the bombs fell, many people rushed to the demonstration vault for safety, the survivors later founding the various boneyard factions and settlements. But now, it's the command headquarters of the Unity Mutant Army, and the lair of their dark god. If you steal and put on some cock robes, you'll be able to freely move throughout the vault without mutants opening fire on you. But I was on the damn warpath at this point, and I shot my way into the base against some tough-ass mutants, and I make it down to the 3rd level, which is covered in this fleshy-looking goop that's all over the place, as if the room itself is mutating. Fucking nasty. And I enter a long, fleshy hallway, the literal hallway of revulsion. But as we walk, we take damage, as the status screen says that we're seeing brutal hallucinations of dead people and our eye getting pierced by sharp bones. And we also have a massive headache. And that's because the Master is so mutated off that FEV, he's developed unironic psychic abilities. No joke. And he is now able to penetrate the minds of people and break them by beaming 40,000 hours of skibbity toilet directly into their brains. And to avoid this psychic damage, you have to go back up to the 2nd floor and obtain a psychic nullifier headset from one of the 4 psychers held on the 2nd floor, who are people who have had FEV injected directly into their brains and pineal glands by the Master's mad scientists, who want to awaken psychic powers in normal people. All this psychic shit being pretty out there, even for Fallout, and I don't see people talk about it too often. And after Fallout 1, the devs seemingly dropped the FEV-induced psychic powers angle after this. And if I recall correctly, the only other time these FEV-induced psychic powers show up in the Fallout franchise is the forecaster kid who lives under a bridge in New Vegas, who wears a psychic nullifier on his head and gives you predictions on future events using his psyker powers, although he's more of a fun reference than an actual serious character. But Jarther's brain is not so easily melted, and I just use my horde of stimpaks to offset the side beam attacks that the Master lobs at me from his evil-ass brain. And once I tank this mind invasion, I finally confront the super mutant Master and his flesh-covered overseer desk. And the Master's talking head is just iconic at this point. It's amazingly grotesque. He's a mass of flesh, thin limbs, and blobs of meat. And I can't tell if these things are supposed to be tubes, or spines, or what. And he has a thin arm with an eyeball on the end of it, and a disfigured and scarred head on top of a computer monitor body. And this is what remains of Dr. Richard Gray, the man Harold was telling us about back in the hub. And this dude is now FEV incarnate, a living mass of mutated flesh that can interface with computers. And of course the brain-frying psychic powers too. So all that weird goop and flesh that's all over this vault is all part of the Master's body. Ugh. And he speaks with multiple digital and organic voices, seeming more like a collective consciousness, instead of a person.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
And by talking to him, we can learn his reasoning as to why he created the Unity and the Mutant Army. After being knocked into the FEV goo vat and transforming into a flesh abomination, Dr. Gray decided that FEV would be the key to the Wasteland's future, because as it was, the Wasteland was a deadly and desolate place, full of scattered and hostile communities fighting over scarce resources. So Gray began testing FEV by abducting Wastelanders and dipping them into the vats of goo, those who survived becoming the super mutants, and Rich saw huge potential in these hulking booger boys. They were strong, robust, resistant to disease, and perfectly equipped to deal with the dangers and hazards of the wasteland, and only sometimes came out dumb as bricks.
Robot.
The Master thought he could solve all the problems of the wasteland by forcing all humans to be changed into super mutants and assimilated into the Unity Army, and once everyone was a mutant, there would no longer be any more need for conflict or suffering, as all mutants would be united under the Master's leadership, creating a lasting peace for the wasteland. A unity, if you will. And that's not a terrible solution either. Super mutants would indeed be much more well equipped to deal with wasteland life, and the state of the wasteland at this time is a bit dire, to say the least. So a united front of strong-ass mutants united with one common goal towards the betterment of the wasteland's future could be a viable alternative to whatever the fuck we got going on now. And the Master used the Children of the Cathedral as a front to obtain new mutants and test subjects, as well as using their dogma to mentally prepare wastelanders for some forced evolution. However, there's one fatal flaw with the Master's plan. As if you have an intelligence of 7 or more, you can talk to and get an FEV mutant research holotape from Vree, the head Brotherhood scribe, which reveals that through some autopsies on mutant corpses, Vree had determined that all super mutants are sterile, and if your speech skill is high enough, you can convince the Master that his master race will all die out after 1 generation, all his hard work for naught. And upon realizing this, and realizing that all this abducting, maiming, and killing of innocent wastelanders to make his mutant army was pointless, the Master becomes inconsolable and activates the cathedral's self-destruct sequence, telling the Dweller to flee, while they still have hope, before committing some explosive suicide.
It cannot be. This would mean that
all my work
has been for nothing. Everything that I've tried to... A failure! It can't be. I don't think that I can continue to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness.
Madness?
There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have
hope.
But my tongue ain't sharp enough for that, and my brain is too small to get the option to even appear. So it's time to drill this room-sized flesh man. And it's not an easy fight as to be expected of the mutant Master. He has another Gatling laser mounted to his super chair, and Nightkin will spawn in the hallway behind you to deliver haymakers into your ass. But using my turbocharged laser rifle, I spammed aim shots at his head and eyes for massive critical damage, and I was far enough away from him to tank his Gatling laser volleys easily. And a few pew-pews later, the Master goes kaboom with another sweet, unique death animation. You then clean up the remaining super mutants and bots, and interact with the active computer to trigger the self-destruct sequence, and we then run out, and once outside, we get another cutscene of the whole cathedral exploding. And with that, that's our quest fully completed. We got the water chip, saved our vault, destroyed the vats of FEV, and shot the Master so hard he fucking exploded. Unlike the LeBron James of Vault 13. The mutants, leaderless and no longer able to make more of themselves, scattered to the east and vanish into the wastes to await the inevitable extinction of their species. And we then return home to Vault 13 for a much-deserved rest, but we're stopped at the door by the Overseer again. Damn, kinda getting sick of this fucking guy, who says that we're the greatest dude ever. We're the savior of not only the vault, but likely the entire wasteland as a whole. But then he says that our aura is now simply too powerful. And I'm talking SGA tier aura. And that's dangerous, as it would make the Vault 13 dwellers want to follow and idolize us, which would put the vault's population at risk of getting too excited and wanting to leave the vault en masse. So the Overseer tells us to do a 180 and GTF out of here. A cold and unfair exile for the literal Vault 13 Messiah. And we see the Vault Dweller, well, his back at least, suspiciously out of his power armor. I worked hard to get that for you, Jarthur. Where'd you put it? Walking head bowed into the vast wasteland desert to an uncertain future, as an encore of Maybe plays, bringing the story of Fallout 1 to a close. And also, if you act fast enough, you can murk the Overseer as he walks away. But I had Jarthur be the bigger man this day. But I kinda regret that choice looking back. And you also get the classic endgame slideshow to see how your actions affected the Wasteland factions and locations. Shady Sands became the NCR under Tandy and Aradesh's leadership. The Khans were wiped out and scattered to the wind. The Brotherhood becomes a powerful force in New California, researching all new kinds of technology. Killian Darkwater takes complete control of Junktown and makes the place safe and fair for all residents. Although siding with Gizmo will get you an arguably better ending for the place, as Gizmo's business acumen makes Junktown boom as a trading town. Necropolis flourishes after I solve its water problems, and I don't let it get steamrolled by mutants. And the followers all got exterminated by mutants.
The mutant armies, led into battle by the fierce super mutants, destroy the followers of the apocalypse. Barely human carrion feeders pick over the followers' remains.
The fuck? Well, apparently, no matter what you do, the followers will always get a bad ending because of an unfinished quest to find a spy within the followers' ranks. We can get a quest from a ghoul in the library basement named Talius, who will ask us to help find a spy from the cock. But the spy NPC isn't present in the game, so the quest is impossible to finish, and dooms the followers to be wiped out every playthrough. But luckily for the followers, their impossible good ending was made the canon ending going forward. But with that all done, that's Fallout 1 completed for real. And what a great adventure it was, as once you get familiar and comfortable with all the menus, mechanics, and some of the more old school and unclear game design choices, Fallout 1 is a really great experience from start to finish. The setting, music, and spray are all absolutely fantastic, and the game really opens itself up for the player to explore, solve problems, and piece together the interesting story through your own travels and interactions, with little in the way of clear, direct guidance. And you're rewarded for exploring and investigating with interesting lore and holodiscs to read and get a full story on things. And it's also just a really solid RPG with really solid classic tabletop mechanics behind it, with plenty of avenues to take on and resolve situations in a multitude of different ways. You can kill, sneak, convince, or fix with your skills. They're all equally valid solutions to most problems, and the Wasteland is pretty much completely open to do whatever you want with it, from true pacifist to unlimited genocide. And the amount of freedom you have here is something the classic Fallouts capture really well, and going from a wimpy, broke and bumbling vault dweller who could barely hit shitty cave rats with his pistol, to a power-armored wasteland warrior who uses a flesh-melting plasma gun that's almost as tall as your character to melt mutated Hulkmen down to their mutated bones. It's such an amazing feeling. And although the combat is really nothing too special, there isn't a huge amount of strategy beyond outnumbering and out-armoring your opponents, but the great sound effects and gory-ass death animations give it a really great amount of juice that keeps combat always satisfying. And I'd easily recommend this game to any Fallout fan if you haven't played it already. And the game is surprisingly compact and efficient. You can beat this whole thing in 3 to 6 hours if you know what you're doing. And I completely understand why this game is so iconic and beloved. In December of 1997, just 2 short months after the release of Fallout 1, the father of Fallout and the game's head producer, Tim Kaine, wrote a Usenet post saying that Fallout 2 development was already underway, and the game should be ready in around 11 months, and he thanks the fans for the great reception that Interplay received from Fallout, their small passion project capturing the adoration and fascination of PC gamers worldwide, with Fallout's fantastic setting and atmosphere, and its rock-solid RPG mechanics that let players solve problems and complete the really great main story in almost any way they see fit. And Fallout 2 promised to be bigger and better in almost every way, from story to main mechanics to just simple quality of life updates. It would be the next great step in Fallout kind. However, back in the Interplay trenches, things weren't going all that well. Despite the hopeful and positive tone of the post, Tim Kaine wasn't all that eager to even make a second Fallout game, as he had intended Fallout 1 to be a standalone experience with a fully completed story. And Tim was also feeling burnt out on Fallout by 1998, spending the last 4 years of his life working tirelessly on his passion project, just to launch into a brand new Fallout game development cycle that needed to be 50% bigger than the original game. And not only that, as instead of 11 months to make Fallout 2, the Black Isle team was only given around 9 months to complete the whole thing, a ridiculously tight development window that naturally led to plenty of forced crunch and feature cuts to actually finish the game on time. So with these combined factors, plus a few other issues Tim had with Interplay, such as not liking the direction the game's world and story were taking, Interplay higher-ups meddling more directly with development, and other situations like an incident involving Interplay head Brian Fargo, who had slashed Tim's bonus pay after Tim refused to name a developer who had accidentally created a memory overwrite bug in Fallout 1. So thanks to all these factors, Tim left Fallout 2's development, alongside other Fallout OGs like world designer Leonard Boyarsky and mutant designer Jason D. Anderson, the Sphincter Monster guy if you remember.
You nasty ass bastard!
They all left Fallout 2's development, which really allowed the remaining devs on Fallout 2 to grab the reins and go wild with their ideas for the game. And we'll see the fruits of these whack-ass brainstorming and design sessions later on. Now, losing such integral developers and designers of the first Fallout, plus the extremely short development time allotted for the game, all set against the backdrop of a financially unstable software company heavily meddling in its development. This sounds like the perfect storm for Interplay to drop a rushed, tonally and thematically scattered and buggy as all hell dump on the proverbial plates of PC gamers in the late 90s. But despite these odds stacked heavily against Fallout 2, the game still managed to completely shock the world. But for a good or bad reason. Let's find out. Fallout 2 starts with another 90s CGI intro cutscene, this time set to the tune of A Kiss to Build a Dream On by Louis Armstrong, setting another great tone right off the bat, feeling a bit more upbeat than the hauntingly dour sounding Maybe from the first game. The cutscene shows us a Vault Tech prepared video presentation on how to prepare to leave the vault, and here's how you do it. Step 1, line your 3D ass up amongst your PNG brethren. Step 2, wear protective eyewear to make sure that the mighty sun doesn't fry your soft dweller eyes. And most importantly, grab yourself a Garden of Eden creation kit, or a GEC for short, a MacGuffin in a briefcase that works essentially as a terraforming device, to easily get agriculture going in this desolate post-nuclear war world. It has seed and soil supplements, a cold fusion nuclear generator, and water and air purifying systems all in one. I'm not 100% sure how it actually works and how it changes arid, radiation dust, poison dirt into bountiful fields of crops, but it just does, so go along with it. But once the video presentation is over, we see the door of the unnumbered vault open up, and waiting at the vault's door is a squad of soldiers in some really futuristic looking power armor suits that got this alien head look to them, with large tubes coming out of the top of the head and big yellow-orange eye covers. And they even have a fully functional Osprey helicopter-type flying machine, which is called a vertibird, parked outside. The Vault Dwellers' silhouettes are seen in the vault's entrance. A damn supernova is going on in the vault behind them or something. But as the Vault Dwellers wave and greet these mysterious armed goons, they immediately open fire on the Dwellers with their miniguns, gunning down everybody, but women and children included, letting us know that whoever these armored guys are, they're evil as shit and very well armed and supplied. But seriously though, this cutscene was always funny to me, because why did they just murder these Dwellers, besides to just show us how insanely evil they are? It seems a bit counterproductive to just mow down prime Vault Dwellers like that. But regardless, we then get another Ron Perlman narrated intro, where we learn the fate of the Vault Dweller after Fallout 1, where after defeating the Unity and being kicked out of Vault 13 by the Overseer for having too much aura, he had wandered the wastes and headed north, eventually founding the small village of Arroyo amongst the canyons in modern-day southern Oregon, which is also the home of our protagonist. Beyond this intro, we don't learn much about the Dweller and his fate, but the Fallout 2 physical manual has a memoir written by the Dweller himself that expands on his story a little bit more, although I'm not exactly sure how canonical this manual memoir is. We learn that the Dweller, confirmed to be male by the way, after being excommunicado from Vault 13, eventually stumbled upon a group of survivors from Vault 13 who were out wandering the wastes, who had left the vault after learning that the Overseer had kicked the Vault Dweller to the curb. So the Vault Dweller helped them survive with his experience, and they all traveled northwest until they founded Arroyo, where the Dweller got married to someone we only know as Pat, had a daughter, and became the Elder of Arroyo, until one day, long after Pat had died, and after all the village kids had grown up and could now take care of themselves and Arroyo, the Vault Dweller decided that he would just get up and vanish into the wasteland to meet his ultimate fate, his existence and life falling into myth and legend for the residents of Arroyo, who have now developed a religious fascination with the Vault Dweller's life and the vaults themselves, seeing them as holy and mythical places, and venerating the Vault Dweller as a messianic figure. We then have to make our character. We can choose one of these 3 horrifying CGI pre-made characters. Narg here still haunts my fucking nightmares. But again, I'll make my own character. The character creation sheet is pretty much unchanged from Fallout 1. Same special, same skills, and a few new traits, like the sex appeal trait that makes you a post-nuclear huzz magnet. And the biggest changes come from how skills are implemented, like Outdoorsman, which is much more helpful as a skill now, and I'll explain why later. Also, another big change comes from the charisma stat, as your charisma now determines how many companions you can have at a time, which is based on what power of 2 your charisma score is, with a maximum of 5 companions and a max 10 charisma score. And with some pretty big companion updates that I'll touch on later, charisma has suddenly become a pretty juicy stat. But for now, let's go with small guns for the early to mid-game combat, energy weapons for late-game combat, and speech, so I can experience this game's funny and wacky dialogue as much as I can. And speech is a pretty powerful tool in Fallout 2. Having a sharp tongue makes the Chosen One's life much easier. And for specials, I'll be going 8 intelligence and 8 agility. Agility is still highly important for combat, and will make the Temple of Trials less of a waste of time. And having a higher intelligence skill will unlock better dialogue options for us that we can synergize with our speech skill. And with that, Jarthan here, great-grandson of Jarther the Vault Dweller, who's not as agile, but decently smarter than his gramps, is ready to be chosen like the one. We then get a cutscene of us being invited into the Arroyo Elder's tent, and we see her in her massive tribal bong. The Arroyo Elder here is supposed to be the daughter of the Vault Dweller and our own character's damn mother, but she never really acts like it, treating the Vault Dweller like a religious figure, rather than, her own father, and treating the Chosen One like any other Arroyan villager, than her own beloved child, never once mentioning these familial bonds in her dialogue. She's strictly business no matter what. But I guess they do parenting a little bit differently in Arroyo. It takes a village, But the Elder tells us that Arroyo is dying and suffering the worst drought in the village's history. Crops are dying and turning into massive piles of CGI poo. The Brahmin are dying too, looking ashy and weak. And Jesus fucking Christ, that's horrifying. The children of the village are thin and sickly. And if that's what the children look like now, Arroyo is fucking cooked. It's kind of impressive how ugly these CGI models are, and they really drive home the fact that Arroyo is withering away and set a really filthy tone for the place. However, all hope is not lost, as the Elder tells us about the Gek, and if we were to find said Gek, its terraforming technology could revitalize Arroyo and save it from wasting away into nothing. However, we can't just set out on our quest right away. We have to prove that we aren't a fraudulent Chosen One by completing this Temple of Trials, the game's tutorial dungeon, and one of Fallout 2's most criticized aspects. The Temple of Trials is a long-hated part of Fallout 2, being an extended, unskippable tutorial dungeon that each new character must complete fully before actually starting the game. And I mean, despite the hate, it's really not that bad, not the worst thing in the world. I mean, I'd rather play this than piss blood, I suppose. And for a first-time tutorial dungeon at least, it's definitely overlong, but it still hits on all the game's mechanics in one go. Combat, exploration and looting, and using skills like lockpick to open doors, and using items in the world, like using some plastic explosives to open up a fortified door, and you have to win a short boss fight with this jabroni to prove yourself as the Chosen One, which is slightly more intuitive, I guess, than just read the manual and figure it out, champ. But the fact that it's completely unskippable makes any player who wants to make a new character feel a bit less motivated to do so, as they think to themselves, oh shit, yeah, I'll have to get past that damn Temple of Trials first. Now, this could easily have been fixed by just making the temple optional, but interestingly, the Temple of Trials was mandated from up on high by Interplay execs, who forced the devs to include this long-ass tutorial section against their own wishes, this demanding of an unskippable tutorial being one of the main reasons Tim Kaine chose to leave the project. Gamers hate it, devs didn't want to make it, but a few businessoids at Interplay demanded it be in the game, so here it is. Such is the way of the world. The temple also sucks for another reason, that being, what exactly is this building? And why is it out here in the remote canyons of southern Oregon? It's got that monolithic Art Deco styling of the Fallout world's architecture, with a massive head over the entrance, which is supposed to be the Vault Dweller's own head. Okay, interesting. And the rest of the temple is this maze of brick hallways, nonsensical rooms, huge doors with complex locking mechanisms, and massive open pits with little rhyme or reason to them. In the lore, the temple was built on an old pre-war structure, likely a museum, and the villagers built this place as a holy temple to their Vault Dweller Messiah, that also doubled as a survival gauntlet that the villagers could test their skills in. But there's no real in-game explanation of why this temple was built, because why did tribals who live in tents create a whole massive brick labyrinth complex to test its residents' survival and combat skills, and to idolize the Vault Dweller? One of the Fallout series' greatest strengths is that its setting allows for designers to take modern everyday buildings, like churches, military bases, grocery stores, libraries, and more, and reimagine them into interesting, post-nuclearified locations to meet new factions, fight new mutant creatures, or discover interesting stories. But this temple has very little rhyme or reason as to why it exists in the world, and it feels like a huge anomaly in the series. And the answer to all these questions and concerns with the Temple of Trials is that the Interplay execs demanded it. So here it is. So the less you think about it, the better. But for the temple, I just head straight for the doors and ignore all the side rooms, and only fight the enemies that cross my path. It's a bit of a waste of time to try and kill all the enemies. It's minimal XP, and there aren't many helpful items to find. You also familiarize yourself with the menus, which is pretty much the exact same as Fallout 1, with a few quality of life features added, like healing items like stim packs will remain in your equipped item box if you still have more than one in your inventory, which speeds up healing a great degree, and we can now use our mouse wheel to quickly scroll through our inventory, instead of having to mash the arrow buttons to scroll. Thank God. We also notably have no starter pistol or any other type of pole to up against these ants and scorpions that infest the temple, But luckily, my agility points allows my unarmed skill to start pretty high, and I always use the strong kicks over the strong punch. You can get like 7-8 damage per kick as a brand new character. So I pick the lock, blow the door, and high kick the heads off any ants and scorpions who dare face me. And I try to talk my way out of fighting Cameron here, but he's gonna throw hands with you no matter what. He tells us that we won't be able to talk our way out of every single situation. Some subtle foreshadowing here.
Die.
So I just roundhouse kick his face until he gives up. And with that, we can access the shrine and take the Vault Dweller's holy jumpsuit and teleport back to the village fitted in our Gramps legendary suit. That shit must be filthy by now. We can then speak again to our elder mother, who congratulates us on not dying in the temple and reiterates our mission to us. But I guess Gramps never spoke much about old Vault 13, as she has no idea where it is. She only has a Vault 13 flask obtained from a trader named Vic, who visited Arroyo to trade in the past, who apparently works out of the nearby settlement of Klamath. So with this one and only lead, we head out to Klamath. But before I go, there's a few things that we can do in Arroyo. Fallout 2 has way more side quests than Fallout 1, and each area feels much more densely packed with stuff to do. I help the medicine man Hakunin, who speaks in spiritualistic metaphors, much to the chagrin of our intelligent chosen one.
The plants of Dark Soul have infested my garden again. Many seasons have touched my bones, and I am too frail for the fight which is eternal in nature. I ask that you be my champion.
And I roundhouse kick some massive living big mouth plants in his garden, so I can get some extra healing powder for my quest. And we can also talk to this fellow tribal in a tent over here, to permanently increase our perception by 1, which is a pretty huge buff. So knowing this, you can reduce your perception by 1 and spec it into another special skill that you want, and then just get it back early right away. But with all this settled, I cross the Arroyo Bridge and head into the Wasteland. The Wasteland map is back, bigger than ever, and you move much more slowly than you did in Fallout 1. And the map truly does feel large, taking days to traverse from place to place on foot. Also, on my Windows 11 modern PC, the map was also extremely broken. It would lag and chug incredibly hard until the cursor just stopped moving completely, freezing the game completely every time I used the map. So I had to edit an INI file in the game files to stop Fallout 2 from lagging itself to death each time I used the map screen. And in fact, Fallout 2 was much more technologically unstable than Fallout 1 for me, because not only did I have this map bug, I also ran into plenty of times where I loaded a new area and the game started chugging like Badlands for like 30 seconds before the game went back to its normal speed. And I also had issues when talking to characters or trading. The cursor would just freeze after not being touched for a short time, forcing me to spam Alt-Tab and open and close the game until it turned all black and I had to redraw the screen with my mouse. And I'm not sure why Fallout 2 is so much more unstable and slow compared to Fallout 1, but it probably has something to do with running old-ass games on hardware made 2 decades after Fallout 2 even came out. But luckily, these issues were usually pretty easy to remedy when they did happen, but do keep an eye out for them. They crop up fairly often. But using the map, we head to Klamath and try to find old Tricky Vic. In Lake Shady Sands, Klamath is sort of our tutorial settlement, where we learn how to gather information from locals and how to explore these new areas. And Klamath, unlike the other locations in Fallout 2, is pretty isolated narratively, and it has no massive settlement spanning problem to solve that will determine its fate. It's mostly a humble trading and gecko skinning town, and we try to find Vic and ask about a gek, but it looks like Vic ain't home. He's not at his store or his shitty hut. And inside Vic's hut, alongside a radio that we'll need later, you can loot a pipe rifle and some ammo from a bookshelf, but that gun is beyond booty, as you have to reload it each time you fire it, and we can get a much better gun here real soon. And despite how hard it is to find guns in the early game, Fallout 2 has many more weapons to play around with than Fallout 1. It has new shotguns like the Jackhammer and Cause, new rifles like the FN-FAL, the XL70E2, the Gauss rifle, and it even has a P90 and a damn G11, the ugliest gun of all time. And there's pistols like a Gauss pistol, a Needler pistol, and a new 44 Magnum, to new big guns and energy weapons, like the Bozar and pulse rifles to all play around with and deal more damage than ever. And we'll need this firepower. The enemies in Fallout 2 are much stronger than they ever were in Fallout 1. Anyway, next, we head to the Trapper Town part of Klamath, where the gecko trappers squat in blown out buildings. And we can talk to this dude, who says that rats have been appearing in droves and attacking local trappers, forcing them to lock up most of the area to keep the rats out. So we volunteer to do some extermination, and we head down into a sizable rat-infested cave, this area feeling like the actual combat tutorial instead of the Temple of Trials, where we can finally find a glorious 10mm pistol on a body down here, which we use to slay the massive king rat boss, a giant mole rat who can talk in broken English. Somehow, and killing him destroys the rats infesting the place. In about an hour into the game, we finally have the starting pistol, and we're about where we were when Fallout 1 started. And once that's done, Back in the town center, we can find this building with a sign for Buckner on it, and inside is the Buckner family, who run a small bar. And there's also an inconspicuous tribal man in here, a dude named Sulik.
What can we and I do you for?
Who is currently an indebted servant to the Buckners after he had gotten hammered and smashed up the bar in a rage. However, Klamath is a slave-free city, so if we can pay off Sulik's debt of $130, the Buckners will let us take him home with us. We can talk to Sulik to learn more about his situation and how he ended up here. And Sulik is a tribal who comes from the, quote, Great Salt Water, and he had traveled all this way to Klamath to try and find Vic, just like us. But he's looking for info on slavers instead of info on a Gek, as slavers had kidnapped his sister, and Sulik has been tirelessly searching for her ever since, seeking out Vic, as apparently he knows a lot about slavers. But when Sulik showed up to Klamath and couldn't find Vic, he got a little frustrated.
Slavers got our sis. Thought Vic be having information. Couldn't peep him. Got PO'd. Drank like a fish. Spirits of anger and chaos pop out, and now we have to pay some coin to make it right.
And Sulik is also schizophrenic and claims that he can sense and speak to the spirits around him.
The spirits with me, friend. They be all around. Sometimes talk.
The most powerful of said spirits being an entity he calls Grampy Bone, a spirit that inhabits the bone that he's got stuck in his nose. And we can ask Sulik to commune with the spirits from time to time to get some esoteric at best wisdom of the spirit realm.
A flower opens its petals to the sun. Seek that which is like the flower.
We also learn from the Buckners that one of their friends, a trapper named Smiley, had gone to some nearby toxic caves to hunt for geckos, but he hasn't returned for a while, so we offer to look for him, which unlocks a nearby toxic caves location on the map, and it's full of geckos, as well as these puddles of dubious green radioactive liquid that'll damage you if you walk on it. But if we equip some rubber boots that we found in Vic's shack, we can walk over the puddles with no trouble at all. So either kill or dodge the geckos, and we can find Smiley in the back of this cave, in this bunker-looking area. But we can't access it now. The generator needs to be fixed, and the elevator door is locked up tight. And my skills can't pay these bills quite yet. So we return Smiley, and he then teaches us how to skin geckos, which will allow us to loot gecko skins off their bodies and sell them for a modest sum of gold coins. Not caps, if you may have noticed. You see, the reason the bottle caps were the currency of the Wasteland in Fallout 1 is because they were the main accepted currency of the hub, the game's only trade-focused society in the Wasteland, and caps were commonly found in ruins and salvage and were backed by water, a substance that was worth as much as gold in a post-nuclear desert hellscape, which the hub had large supplies of via the water merchants. But most importantly, bottle caps are practically impossible to counterfeit, as no Wastelander had the ability to manufacture new bottle caps. All the machinery needed to do so was long since busted, so caps became the currency of post-apocalyptic SoCal. But now, almost a century has passed, and many settlements have grown and new factions and powers like the NCR have formed, who were soon able to mint their own coins and money, using refurbished technology to press gold mined from mining towns like Redding. These new NCR dollars making bottle caps mostly obsolete by the time Fallout 2 takes place, which shows how much societal and technological progress is being made in the Wasteland since Fallout 1. The NCR is now so robust as a society, they can now mine gold and mint new coins from said gold, showing a strong return in supply chains and manufacturing capabilities in this newer wasteland, which is some really cool world building. But back to our quest. After trading some supplies I picked up in the toxic caves, I can now free Sulik from his indentured servitude and pick him up as our first companion. Sulik is a melee-focused character, so there's no need to worry about stocking him up with guns and ammo or anything. And Sulik can get up to an 80% outdoorsman skill, which you can use to skip random encounters later on down the line. And so you don't have to invest into the skill yourself. Now, you think we should go looking for Sulik's sister, but unfortunately, Sulik's sister was completely cut from the game, and he more or less forgets about her after you recruit him, and the story thread hits a sudden dead end here, making her a missing slave forever. Damn. It's a pretty tough fate for an NPC. But regardless, now that we have Sulik in tow, we can now use the all-new combat control button when talking to him, which opens up the brand new companion control screen, one of Fallout 2's bigger changes. In the original Fallout, you didn't have a whole lot of control over your companions. You could either tell them to stick close, or keep a distance from you, and you could tell them to use their best weapon in combat, and that was about it. But now, you can trade freely with companions, see a detailed breakdown of their skills and stats, edit their combat dispositions, and choose their best weapons and armor. It's a great new addition that lets you more finely tune your companions' combat strategies, and lets you have full control over their gear without having to trade in cash with them, to make gearing them up much more simpler. And as we'll see later, Fallout 2 has a much wider variety of companions, who all fight in several different ways. So mastering this new control system will help you greatly when you got both melee and ranged companions fighting together. And the only downside of these new companions is that they door stucked me way more than they ever did in Fallout 1, trapping me in 1 hex wide passages and blocking doors often. But luckily, the right-click context dropdown now has a push your companion's ass out of the way button, which will allow you to door unstuck yourself, which is a great feature that the 3D Fallout game should have had. Like, imagine if your companion blocks a door, you could push them over and make them ragdoll by force, essentially like an untouched Fus Roda. I think that would have been a great feature. Companions can now level up alongside the player and improve their skills, companions usually having 4 to 5 stages that they can level up to make them feel less like complete dead weight by the late game. However, and this is a big however too, companion level ups are up to complete random chance on player level up, so when you get stronger, that doesn't mean your companions will get stronger alongside you. So if you want to max out your companion's stats, you have pretty much no other choice than to save scum when you're close to leveling up, and reload until they also level up with you. And I'm not really sure why it was designed this way. It just makes companions inconsistent at best, and potentially super weak if they don't hit those level ups at worst. And maybe it's to keep companions from getting too strong too quickly, but in that case, the devs could have just added more stages to level up to, so each level makes the whole party stronger each time, instead of hoping that RNGesus blesses Sulik so he can get his outdoorsman skill higher. It's just an odd game design choice. But overall, the new companion upgrades, mechanics, and the great variety of companions are some of Fallout 2's best features. But anyway, we still need to find Vic, so we ask around town for him. We eventually end up talking to his favorite local prostitute at the Klamath bathhouse, and she says that she isn't sure where he is, but assumes that he's out trading with some local tribals, or maybe he's trading at the Den, a nearby settlement that's full of slavers, gambling addicts, and drug dealers, giving us a new lead to follow in our Vic hunt. So we head out of town and head for the Den. And along the way, you'll likely, actually scratch that, you will run into some sort of random encounter while traveling on the map. Since you now move slower, they're more common, and there's more types of encounters to run into than in Fallout 1. Almost 100 years later, and the Wasteland is feeling much busier than it used to. There's way more NPCs per encounter, and encounters have way more decoration and varied locations to take place in. And here's where Outdoorsman comes into play. If your Outdoorsman skill is strong enough, when you hit a random encounter, if the skill check clears, you'll be given a pop-up describing what the encounter is, and if you want to engage with it or not. And in the early game, this is a great tool to have in your arsenal, as these random encounters can be absolutely brutal. Mutant, Wolf, and Raider gang squads will appear to hang, draw, and quarter your ass in a turn or less. Sometimes 2 factions will team up to kill you, other times 2 factions will attack you and each other at once, lining up in V formations of groups of like 5 to 12 or more to assault me and my companions. And packs of wolves up to like 14 strong will appear to devour you and your companions. And most of these encounters are just pure death sentences if you can't move to the exit tiles fast enough. These are some literal hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby matchups here, which makes early game traveling a massive pain in the ass when you're constantly running into wasteland death squads who want nothing more than to show you that skeletal vault dweller death screen, forcing you to reload and restart traveling constantly. So, you'll have to place some saves before traveling, and just like in the first game, save whenever the whim takes you. These brutal ass encounters practically force you to save scum your early travel sessions, as there's like an 80% chance you'll run into an unwinnable encounter, get creamed, and have to restart. So save up. However, if you manage to encounter a smaller group of raiders, and if you actually manage to defeat them, you'll be able to take all their gear to sell and equip for yourself, which can give you some huge early game firepower and cash boosts if you get lucky. But it's not very easy to run into these more favorable encounters, so you more or less have to save scum and farm random encounters until you run into a favorable fight if you want to go that route. And of course, there's the special Easter egg encounters, like a crashed Star Trek shuttle with red shirt corpses surrounding it, a horde of killer Brahmin, a massive talking stone head, a Monty Python reference of King Arthur's powered armored knights looking for the holy hand grenade, a bridge guarded by a hooded man, which is another Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference.
What is your name? What is your quest? What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
What do you mean? An African or European swallow?
An exploded whale corpse, which is a clear reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which has a chapter that describes a whale that is spontaneously brought to life above a planet, and it contemplates its new existence and the meaning of life, before smashing to the planet's surface and exploding into a gore pile. And the most curious one I ran into was this one where there was a massive group of people, called the Unwashed Villagers, all ganging up on this beggar-looking NPC called the Grim Reaper, who has a huge health pool of 200 HP, and the Unwashed Villagers all take turns attacking the Reaper as he walks in a circle and glows at them. And once they kill him, they all run away. And I had no idea what I was looking at, and I had to look it up to see what this was a reference to. And apparently, it's a reference to the Unwashed Villager community, a long-standing online Fallout fan community. And this special encounter is a reference to a real-life flame war they had with a troll named the Grim Reaper, a prolific spammer on the Interplay forums back in the day, making posts like this. And this is an in-game recreation of their forum war, which is pretty interesting shit. I love when devs shout out their fans like this, and this is probably one of the most niche Easter eggs I've ever seen in a game. Also, pro travel tip. Unlike Fallout 1, most town and settlement merchants are usually pretty strapped for cash, only carrying around a few $100, instead of like the 1,000 to 3,000 caps that every merchant in Fallout 1 had, which makes selling off the more expensive items pretty hard and tedious. But if you need to sell something for cash, don't mess around with the broke bums. Instead, head to the mining town of Redding, which is in the upper middle part of the map, and enter the city hall that doubles as a casino, and speak to this clerk at this tiny window. And unlike the other broke-ass traders, this guy has over 2,000 bucks to trade with, so if you need to sell a gun or set of armor and get its value in pure cash, go trade with this guy. And this took me way too long to find, and I burned hours fighting enemies and trading for 200 bucks at a time to get my money up. And I wish I knew this guy existed when I was doing all that, lighting my time on fire shit. Anyway, once we reach the den, we ask around for Vic, and we learn that he's currently being held hostage by some prick named Metzger, who runs the unsubtly named Slavers Guild here in the den. So we enter the Slavers Guild HQ and spot Vic being held in a room inside. And Vic has a new sprite made for Fallout 2. And you can tell what sprites are new based on how many animation frames they have. They literally move smoother than the older sprites. And we go and talk to Metzger first, and we ask him why he's got old Vic enslaved in a closet. And Metzger says that Vic had sold him a broken radio. And after realizing that he had been ripped off, Metzger flew into a rage and enslaved Vic and now forces him to fix his equipment. And we then talk to Vic, who relays the same story to us, and we give him the old radio that we found in his Klamath shack, which he can use to fix the busted radio. And now Metzger says that he'll let Vic go for a modest sum of 1,000 bucks, which is a bit too much for me right now. So sorry Vic, looks like you'll have to be enslaved a bit longer, maybe indefinitely. Who knows? The game puts up a $1,000 wall here to force you to get out a bit more and to gather up supplies to sell in order to free Vic, as the alternative of massacring the Slavers Guild to liberate him is a bit impossible right now for these two broke vagrants, Jarthan and Sulik. But don't heavily prioritize freeing Vic. Besides a good repair skill he can use, he's not a very good companion, and his knowledge about Vault 13's location has been greatly exaggerated by the Arroyo Elder, and he actually knows jack shit about the actual Vault 13. So for now, I leave Vic enslaved in the den and continue on heading east on the map. But before I go, I stop by the den's junkyard and spot a shack with a pretty intact looking car parked out front, and we speak to the mechanic, Smitty, and learn that this is a Chrysler's Highwayman, the closest thing to a functioning car in the whole wasteland. And Smitty says that he's just missing one part, a fuel cell controller to fully fix the car, and if we can get the part for him and fork over 2,000 bucks for mechanic services, Smitty will sell us the car. Which sounds like a pretty sweet deal to me. You can also try to repair it yourself once you get the part to try and save 2,000 bucks, but you need a repair skill of at least 110% to do that. But we currently have no clue where we could get a fuel cell controller. So for now, we make a mental note of the thing and move on. But as we travel, we hit another random encounter, and Jarthan and Sulik stumble upon some people in the wrong place at the wrong time. A small family is being pressed by what appears to be a massive super mutant of some kind, who is somehow equipped in a full set of power armor, flanked by 2 soldiers in some more advanced looking black power armor. The armored giant demands the family come with him, but the man refuses, saying that he'll never support the giant's cause, preferring to die over sharing whatever knowledge he has with these armored men and the monster. So they let the man stand on his business and they mow the family down, even blasting the poor kid into gory chunks. It's pretty ballsy to have such gory child murder as part of the main story here. And the giant then turns to me and Sulik and tells us to mind our business and fuck off. And they walk away, Jarthan frozen in place, probably shitting his britches right about now. And this was our first encounter with the Enclave, the evil-ass dudes who mowed down the Vault Dwellers from the intro. And this encounter is always scripted to happen, and it's a great in-game introduction to the Enclave. It makes their existence immediately intimidating to the player, and it injects you with a lingering sense of anxiety, because I just know I'll have to fight that Nephilim in a suit of power armor later on, aren't I? But anyways, as we continue traveling, we soon stumble upon a settlement called Modoc. And when we enter, we find a pretty tough scene. Modoc is a farming and ranching town, both of which are in steep decline, and the place feels arid and empty, and there aren't many people around, and those who are say that the place is dying. So we enter the trading post and speak to the mayor, Joe, and learn more about the situation. Joe says that there isn't much left of the town, and the general store isn't even open due to lack of supplies, and Modoc will die soon if nothing changes. But he also mentions something odd, as apparently, near MODOK is something Joe calls the Ghost Farm, a farm that's the opposite of MODOK. Its fields are full of bountiful crops. However, no Modokians have ever actually seen anyone working the fields, leading them to assume that it was recently abandoned for some reason. So a local named Carl moved into the Ghost Farm, but Carl soon started reporting that he was spotting ghosts haunting his fields at night, which the Modokians just laughed off as Carl losing his gourd and acting a little goofy. Until one day, Carl vanished and stopped coming into town, and when they went to investigate the ghost farm, they found dozens of bodies brutally impaled on spikes, and blood and gore strewn everywhere, which made Joe shit his pants in fear, and he hasn't been back since. So Joe asked us to help investigate what happened at the ghost farm and figure out how the crops are growing so well, and if we do this for him, he says that he has some info on the Gek for us. So for now, we'll bite. So we head to the ghost farm and find the bodies and gore Joe mentioned. Jesus, what the hell is Vlad the Impaler farming out here? But if we take a closer look at the bodies, we find that they're just dummies with Brahmin gore splashed all over them. That's pretty odd. And when we take a look inside the farmhouse, we soon fall through a hole in the ground and find ourselves in a cavern settlement filled with people and ghouls. And after laughing at me falling on my ass, these two armed guards take me to the faction's leader, some guy named Vagir. And Vagir tells us that they are the Slags, a group of people who came about after a local militia in Northern California had sealed themselves underground to avoid the nuclear apocalypse, and after a few generations in an underground cave, they had mutated into pale-skinned, large-pupiled humans who have a crippling fear of the night sky, fearing that they'll fall upward into the endless black void, so they curl up and hold onto the ground for dear life when exposed to it. And I wish there was a talking head made for Vagir, so we could see his slag mutations for ourselves, instead of it just being described, as the slags just appear as generic ghoul and human sprites on the map. Oh well. Vagir says that the slags are the ones who tend the ghost farm, and as a mostly passive and peaceful people, they put up all those dummies and flung Brahmin gore all around the place to scare off any travelers. And he promises that even though the slags are kinda creepy, they're actually pretty chill and very reasonable, and he asks us to deliver a message to MODOK to offer to open up trade relations with the town. So we run the message to Joe, and we tell him that the Slags are not insane murderers, just a community of some creepy, pale-skinned bugmen who live underground. But Joe is still skeptical, as he still thinks that the Slags had foully dealt with Carl somehow, and he asks us to find him, or else MODOK's residents will attack the Slags in 31 days. But while we were at the den, at Mom's Bar in the bottom right corner of the slavers part of town, we can find a man inside, begging for money so he can go get sloshed. And if we ask him about his life story, he says that he used to live on a farm near a town called MODOK, until he started spotting what he calls ghosts in his fields, and he would wake up to find crops and Brahmin missing. This paranormal activity eventually driving Carl borderline insane, and to deal with his trauma, he ran off to the den to become a degenerate drunkard, with MODOK's residents assuming that the ghost farm had claimed his life. So if we tell Joe that Carl is fine, he's just homeless and begging for booze in the den, Joe will then finally relax and decide to meet with the Slags, hopefully to establish a beneficial agreement where both sides prosper. And we then ask Joe about info on the Gek, but sorry, he was trolling a bit, and he admits that he doesn't know anything about a Gek, but he does know about a town called Gek. Oh, a ghoul-run settlement further east of MODOK, built around an old nuclear power plant. So with no other leads, we head towards Gecko. Also, be sure to stop by the ghost farm and talk to Vagir again, as he'll gift you a sweet assault rifle and some ammo as a reward for our excellent diplomacy. Nice, nice. So we then head to Gecko, which isn't too far away, and when we arrive, we stop into the main building and find Old Harold.
Hello there, Smooth Skin. The name's Harold. I help keep this town running.
Yo, what's up, buddy? You're looking greener than ever. Harold has moved here from the hub and has become the Gecko town leader, due to his age, knowledge of the technology in the reactor, and his skills in trading from his early days as a caravaneer, organizing trade deals with the settlement of Broken Hills to fuel their massive nuclear reactor, the pre-war Poseidon oil reactor number 5, who the ghouls operate thanks to their radiation resistance, although their knowledge of pre-war reactors is iffy at best.
I mean, they are not too bright. Here's an example. The other day, I get a report. On it, it says the main coolant valve should be shut down. That would have caused a meltdown. That would make the Grand Canyon look like a pig wallah.
Harold also now has a small tree sapling growing out of his head, a small side effect of his FEV GUVAT exposure, which he calls Bob, and occasionally talks to.
Jealous? His name's Herbert. I talk to him when I get lonely. Just kidding. His name's Bob.
The same Bob who ends up stapling him to the floor in Fallout 3. And I wish I could tell him to keep Bob trimmed. Despite having a functioning nuclear reactor, Gecko isn't without its problems. Harold tells us that the power plant is running, but it's partially broken, and it's missing a part called a hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator, which is causing radioactive coolant to leak into the ground, polluting the groundwater supply, which is slowly poisoning the nearby settlement of Vault City, who are already a huge pain in the ass for the residents of Gecko, as they aren't exactly tolerant of ghouls and other wasteland mutants, and they would just prefer to massacre the ghouls instead of working with them. But Vault City is the only place that we can get our hands on a hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator, so we're gonna have to play Diplomat again to best solve this reactor problem. Also, in Harold's shack, there's a pale-looking ghoul named Lenny, who talks in a lisp and claims that he saw the Vault Dweller passing through Necropolis during his legendary journey to blow up a church. And Lenny has regretted not joining the Vault Dweller's party ever since that day he saw him. And well, his grandson just walked in the door. Never too late for second chances, Lenny. So if you tell Lenny that you're a descendant of the Dweller and you're on a similar quest to save your village, you can recruit him as your next companion. And Lenny specializes in medicine and first aid, but he can still up-pull when asked. Hand him a 10mm SMG, and he's good to go. And we can also explore the northern area of Gecko, this junkyard area surrounding an unfinished reactor. And we can talk to this ghoul in this shack, and his name is Skeeter, who says that he's a mechanic, and he's got the exact fuel cell controller part that we need to fix the highwayman back in the den. But he'll only trade it to us if we give him a brand new toolbox, which can also be found only in Vault City. And we can also talk to another ghoul, Gordon. Greedy Gordon the Ghoul from Gecko. Gordon describes himself as a greedy opportunist, but he swears that greed is a good thing, as it drives technological innovation, you see. And Gordon has a plan for Gecko and Vault City. He says that Gecko's power plant isn't properly optimized on top of missing its hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator doohickey. And if it were to be fully fixed and optimized, the reactor could power both Gecko and Vault City with plenty of energy to spare. He also says that he heard through some inside informants that Vault City can't expand further without Gecko's reactor, as their Vault 8 generators are already at capacity. And he then hands us a holodisk that has all the economic data to prove why Vault City and Gecko working together to fully fix the reactor could be quite lucrative, as long as he gets to oversee the project, of course. But despite his insistence that he's this ultra greedy, selfish asshole, Gordon here is one of the most progressive and forward-thinking NPCs in the entire game. As if this deal goes through, and both sides put aside their prejudices and distrust, both Gecko and Vault City would greatly benefit from surplus power and trade. A pure win-win, which sounds great to me. So with the holodisk in hand, all roads lead to Vault City, and luckily, it's pretty much right next door. So we pull up to the fortified gates of Vault City, protected by armed guards and auto turrets, and we enter into a shanty town that's outside the main walls of the city, where all the unwashed masses of Vault City reside. And also, the music is absolutely bumping.
Yo, yo, yo!
Vault City was founded by the residents of Vault 8, a rare control vault with no sadistic experiment or catastrophic technological failure to speak of. They all chilled in the vault, got the all-clear signal after a few years, busted out the Gek, and made the most advanced city in post-apocalyptic California, the embodiment of the ideal outcome for a vault. They have immense amounts of technological and medical equipment, along with amazing amenities, like mowed grass, trees, all of Vault 8's technology, the most medical supplies in the wasteland, clean streets, a big council hall.
Slave labor.
Despite the advanced technology, life ain't all cookies and cream in Vault City. It's a highly stratified society led by their patrician class, the citizens, people who were born in Vault 8 or are descendants of Vault 8 dwellers, who you can usually spot rocking those tight-ass numberless jumpsuits. Anyone not born into Vault City citizenship luxury has to take an impossibly hard test to become a citizen, like Qing Dynasty's civil service test hard. You need 9 intelligence, 9 perception, and 9 luck to pass the test. And I'm not even sure it's possible to raise these stats to 9 in regular gameplay without making an extremely scuffed-ass build solely made to pass the test. Non-citizens can't even enter Vault City without a proper day pass that they have to pay for, and even then that's mostly for merchants anyway. And besides all that, the only other way to enter Vault City as a non-citizen is as a slave, or servants as Vault City prefers to call them. It's a bit less hostile sounding. Servants are forced to do menial tasks and labor, bossed around by their citizen overlords. But in terms of slave labor, which is pretty widespread in Northern California, Vault City is a pretty cushy gig. Safety, food, water, and shelter are all guaranteed, and the labor seems to be more menial than backbreaking, well, most of the time at least. And it looks like it could be way worse. And many of the servants will talk about how glad they were to end up in Vault City. Sure beats the fucking den, I guess. But before we enter the city proper, we gotta tell Lenny to stay put. As you see, Vault City is deeply racist against ghouls and mutants, and they aren't allowed to enter the gates of Vault City, unless you become the chief of security of Vault City, which comes into play later, and is kind of a secret mechanic. We still have to get into the place first. Also, before we stop into the city, if you enter this bar, you can talk to the bartender, John Cassidy, the father of Fallout New Vegas companion Cass.
Long Dick Johnson.
He's a gruff and honest guy, and we can listen to him bitch about the Vault City guards harassing his bar about having the proper licenses to sell liquor and arresting his patrons for fun. Doing so will make him realize that living in Vault City sucks ass, and we can recruit him as our third companion if we choose to do so. But I leave him be for now, and we get to the main gate, but we can't enter without a day pass, so we enter this side building and talk to the customs officers. One way we can get in is paying for a day pass, after convincing the man in charge here that we're a merchant, here to sell our unwashed tribal companion Sulik into servitude. But fuck that option, as we can get inside the city for cheap by talking to the other officer, this dastardly named fella named Skeeve, who will forge us some fake citizenship papers for a modest $200. And using my speech skill, I immediately blackmail Skeeve into paying me $300 to not immediately snitch on him for giving me a fake ID. Classic. But now we're free to enter Vault City. The guards can't tell that my papers are fake. And I head directly for the council building to talk to the first citizen, the sort of elected president of Vault City, a woman named Joanne Lynette, to try and discuss the Gecko power plant situation, as well as ask if they have a spare Gek on hand. So we speak to Lynette, who has garnered a reputation in the Fallout series as the wickedest bitch west of the Colorado River, and she lives up to her reputation.
You barge into my chambers, and then have the audacity to make demands of me? Lynette, first citizen of Vault City?
She's snippy, arrogant, cruel, and straight up genocidal when it comes to the ghouls and mutants, and most of her dialogue trees end with her getting pissed and telling you to leave, or straight up throwing you out of Vault City.
I believe it is time you left. I suggest you make your stay in Vault City a short one.
We first ask after a Gek, and we try to convince her to help us with our story of being the chosen descendant of the Vault Dweller, on a holy quest for a Gek to save our dying village full of horrifying, emaciated CGI children. But Lynette only gets that we're some kind of Vault Dweller out of our whole spiel. But we convince her that we're serious by showing her our Vault 13 jumpsuit and flask.
These are authentic. Unbelievable.
And she then tells us that Vault City already used their one and only Gek, and any other info on another Gek and the location of other vaults could probably be found in their archives, but only citizens can access the Vault City archives. And don't try to use your fake ID to gain access. Lynette is a super narc and will bust you for identity fraud on the spot.
You take me for a fool? If anyone would know these were fakes, it would be me. Who gave you these papers?
And we also try to ask her to help with getting the hydroelectric yada yada to fix the Gecko power plant for the ghouls. But Lynette refuses any option but the total extermination of Gecko and its ghoulish inhabitants. She just assumes that the ghouls are intentionally poisoning Vault City because mutant equals evil. And we hit a dead end with Lynette here. But luckily, over in the opposite side of the council hall is the other counselor, a guy named McClure, who unlike Lynette, is a total lib, and is much more willing to hear us out. Also, this dialogue option when you meet him is just so funny to me. It's just so unserious. He's all like, "What can I do for you?" And you're like, "I don't know, old man. What can you do for me?" It's just so funny and rude. I don't know why. Anyway, we asked McClure about a Gek, and he mentions an interesting tidbit, as apparently, Vault 8 was supposed to receive 2 Geks, but only ended up getting 1, as their shipment got messed up with a shipment to Vault 13, so Vault 8 received a shipment of 100 extra water chips instead, which they never actually needed, as their water chip never gave up the ghost on them. So now they've got boxes full of useless water chips just sitting in Vault storage, which is such a great joke about our quest to find just 1 water chip in Fallout 1. There I had to dive into a vault, explore 4 settlements, kill a squad of massive mutated Hulkmen armed with body-splitting laser weapons, and jury-rig a massive water pump using trash I found on the ground in a sewer to get my hands on just 1 water chip. And now there's 100 useless chips that the Chosen One, or anyone else, couldn't care less about. The Vault Dweller would fall to his knees if he saw this. McClure also tells us about some other issues Vault City is having, most notably pressure from the NCR to join them, along with some unusual raider attacks on Vault City, as usually the armed guards, walls, and auto turrets are enough to scare off any gang of unwashed raiders. But these raiders seem to have advanced tactics and expensive weapons broke raiders usually don't use. And according to the guard captain, they even took out a laser turret, but didn't attack further despite a clear path into the city being created. We'll look into this later. For now, we can also ask McClure about fixing the Gecko power plant and getting a spare hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator. And McClure is much less violently genocidal when it comes to Gecko and the ghouls and Lynette, and he sees us fixing the plant ourselves as an acceptable solution, so he authorizes us to get an HMR from the amenities office. Sweet. We also hand him Gordon's holodisk and tell him Gordon's plan to optimize the power plant and trade power with Vault City, and he's on board if we can get it to work. Double sweet. So we grab our HMR, and with that, we're ready to fix the Gecko power plant. But before we go, let's stop on over to the maintenance depot and speak to the extremely pissy lady working there, who we can get a toolbox from if we find a multi-tool and a wrench for her. Getting a multi-tool is easy. We can just steal one out of Skeeter's shack, and we can get a wrench real quick by helping this little boy outside of Cassidy's bar find his Richard Nixon plushie in a corner behind the bar, where you can then brutally torment the boy by dismembering the Nixon doll, or just handing it over. And he'll then reveal that he stole his dad's wrench and hid it under some nearby rocks, as Mr. Nixon tells the boy that it's best to lie to his dad about what happened to the wrench. I guess someone at Black Isle wasn't a big fan of old Tricky Dick. But once we got both the multi-tool and the wrench, we hand him over to the lady and wait a day, and she'll give us a super toolkit that we can trade with Skeeter for the fuel cell regulator and to fix the car. Sweet. Also, after a few months of travel, while you're on the map, you'll get a dream vision of Hakunin calling out to you, to basically tell you that Arroyo is still dying and to hurry your ass up.
Chosen, the spirits of our ancestors guide me to a world of dreams that I may touch thoughts. Our village suffers without the holy Gek. Your hands hold our lives as a father holds his children.
How he's able to psychically broadcast his message to us? I have no idea. He's not an FEV psyker or anything like that. Well, at least I don't think so. I will admit he looks a little weird, but I don't think it's FEV induced. All he says is that the spirits of the ancestors had guided him through the dream realm to invade our mind. So I guess dude is using ghosts like a Wi-Fi extender or something. Don't think about it too much. These Hakunin dreams definitely put the pressure on you and remind you of the real task at hand, but don't sweat them at all. There's no real hard time limit in Fallout 2 like the water chip deadline in Fallout 1, so keep exploring as much as you please, and don't worry about these Hakunin psychic dreams all that much. So with the HMR in hand, we return to the Gecko power plant, and I talk to the power plant's self-aggrandizing foreman, a ghoul named Festus, and convince him to get off his lazy ass and install the HMR himself with a speech check. Otherwise, we gotta play a memory game with a maintenance Mr. Handy, where we have to program it to inspect all the reactor parts in the right sequence in order to install the HMR. Also, at the Gecko power plant's control terminal, you can accidentally video call the Enclave and start talking to a bored-sounding information officer. And if you ask him who the President of the United States is, he thinks you're trolling him, and you then get treated to one of the greatest voice line deliveries in gaming history.
The President of the United fucking States of America. Who do you think I was talking about? Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass. Who is this?
And then he goes all guerrilla warfare post on us, saying he's gonna track our location to the Poseidon Energy Reactor number 5, and he's gonna send an assault squad of elite Enclave goons to turn us to dust.
Got you. At Poseidon Oil, reactor number 5. Well, why don't you just sit tight and I'll order up a little celebration for you, including fireworks.
But hilariously, no Enclave will ever show up to Gecko. These devs making such an easily missable encounter is so legendary. I bow. But with that done, we still need to optimize the reactor like Gordon said. So we talk to Festus and get a holodisk to download optimization data from the Vault City computers with, and I run back to Vault City and report to McClure that we fixed the power plant. And with that, McClure makes us an official citizen of Vault City, completely bypassing Lynette. Nice. Now it's time to check those Vault 8 computer archives with our newly acquired patrician privileges. So we head into Vault 8 and head to the bottom floor and access the main computer. We search for records of other vaults, but all we can find is the location of Vault 15. So we put the coordinates into our Pip-Boy and download the optimization data as well. And we run back to Gecko one more time to load the data, and we get a fat EXP boost for fully optimizing the reactor. But with that done, we can finally head south towards Vault 15. And along the way, we can run into another settlement. And when we enter, we find the mining town of Broken Hills, a curious town with both mutants, ghouls, and humans living together. And we speak to the mayor and the sheriff, and the greatest mutant of all time, my guy Marcus. Fallout New Vegas players will recognize him as the later mayor of the mutant sanctuary Jacobstown, and it seems he's got a thing for government administration. We ask Marcus about the place, and he says that it's a mining town that mostly makes its money from its uranium mine, which is manned by the super mutant miners. And we also ask him about how this unusual multi-mutant town came to be, and he tells us a little story. Marcus was a member of the Unity super mutant army, and after the Master was destroyed by the Vault Dweller, Marcus began wandering the wasteland, until one day, he came across a Brotherhood of Steel paladin named Jacob, and they immediately began firing on each other, as you'd expect. But after a few days of gunfighting, Both Marcus and Jacob realized that this firefight was a stupid waste of time, so they shared a laugh, and Marcus and Jacob then became fast friends and began traveling together, with both humans and mutants alike beginning to follow this odd duo. A super mutant and a Brotherhood knight yucking it up together? They had to see what that was all about. And soon, Marcus, following some old maps of nearby mines, founded Broken Hills with Jacob, and he's been here ever since. Marcus is extremely smart and well-spoken for a mutant. He has a pretty chilled-out demeanor, although he's still a bit of a true believer in the Master's cause. He's been a mutant for so long, he's mostly forgotten his life as a normal human, and thinks that his mutant form is best suited for this new wasteland world. And he and Jacob used to argue all the time about whether or not going super mutant was the right choice for humanity.
Hell yes, I would have. What a great mutant he would have been. We had this argument all the time. I miss that hard head.
But I guess he never learned about the "my whole race is sterile" nuance to the situation. And later, if you recruit him as a companion, when you go to places like New Reno, upon seeing all the sex, drugs, and general degeneracy, Marcus will say, "This is an example of why the Master was right." You're not too far off on that one, Marcus. But Broken Hills isn't without its problems. Marcus mentions that the mine's air filtration system is breaking down, and a few residents had recently gone missing, and he tasks us to solve both problems. And if we do, we can get this minigun-equipped super mutant to travel with us, so I'm 1000% on board for that. And I first look for the missing people, and if we enter this manhole in this crop field, inside this ant-infested cave is a room full of mutilated corpses. So once we shoot our way over there, by searching the bodies, we can loot a letter, which was written by a mutant named Francis, addressed to the mutant mine foreman. Francis says that a town resident named Jacob, not the same Jacob as Marcus's buddy, mind you, is the ringleader in an anti-mutant conspiracy. Francis suspecting that they even sabotaged the mine's air purifier, and this cave spot seemed to be their meeting place. And it looks like Francis got a bit carried away when confronting these people. So when we confront Francis the mutant, he says that these humans were trying to kill him, and this was just a really messy and drawn out case of self-defense. And he claims that the humans in town hate and live in fear of the mutants, which he isn't exactly wrong on. Jacob the chemist hates and fears the mutants, and recruits you to sabotage the mine even further if you want to side with them against the Booger Boys. But Francis agrees to leave town as a compromise, to keep tensions from exploding into further violence and division. And that's one task done. But while I was checking out that hole in the ground where the crops were growing, I spotted a text blurb coming from the plants, and I investigated to find an honest-to-God hyper-intelligent talking plant who tells me that he's bored in this field. The other plants don't talk to him, you see, so he wants us to find a shovel so we can scoop them up and replant them near a house full of ghouls, so we can chat with them instead. And once we do that, this Little Shop of Horrors reference tells us about a secret chess technique called the Flying Liver that we can use to beat a hyper-intelligent scorpion made by a wacky professor in a game of chess, who is injecting mysterious serums into plants and scorpions to try to make them super intelligent. So we challenge and beat the scorpion in chess using the Flying Liver technique, and it attacks me in a rage after being so thoroughly humbled, forcing me to put it down in self-defense. A bit of a kooky side quest, to say the absolute least. Next, to fix the mine filtration system, we need to get a part from Renesco in New Reno and bring it back. And New Reno isn't too far west, and it's the most glamorous shithole in the entire wasteland, built out of the ruins of Reno, Nevada, and much like its pre-war counterpart, is a city built on gambling and all the other vices that come with it. It's got casinos, bars, brothels, boxing gyms, porn studios, drug dealers, and pimps everywhere. And it's even got these freakishly large bouncers guarding the casinos. Like seriously, based on Jarthan's size, if he's around like 6 feet tall or so, these bouncers gotta be like damn near 8 feet tall. They're fucking huge. New Reno is controlled by 4 competing crime families: the Mordinos, the Bishops, the Salvatores, and the Wright families, all of whom deal drugs and alcohol as their main source of income. However, each family is involved in some secret schemes to get an edge on their oppositions. The Mordinos have some kid named Myron, who is the creator of the wildly popular and addictive chem called Jet, that's currently taking the wasteland by storm. And the Mordinos are scheming, producing and shipping large quantities of Jet to Redding to get the miners hooked on it in exchange for gold shipments for even more Jet, giving them a huge amount of influence over the wasteland's main gold source. We can meet Myron by heading to the stable's drug lab that he's set up in, and all you gotta do to see him is kill his guards. And nobody seems to care if they get brutally murdered. Not even Myron himself is all that bothered by it.
Who are you? And how the hell did you get in here? Where are those jackass guards? God damn it. I told Jesus those 2 morons couldn't guard a stone.
but don't let his dorky demeanor fool you. This dude is an absolute freak, and if you're playing a female character with high enough charisma, Myron will constantly try to put the riz on you.
Why, hello there, beautiful. What can Myron do for you?
And if you're playing a low intelligence female, you can dialogue tree yourself into getting drugged and touched on by Myron. Yeah, real classy. And you can recruit him as a companion as well. It's pretty interesting to be able to recruit such a morally reprehensible character to your squad, but I don't want this fucking chode walking in my shadow. It'll make me look bad, so I'll pass on that. Also, if your intelligence is high enough, Myron will reveal how he invented Jet. And basically, it's concentrated Brahmin shit fumes. You know, like Jenkum. These Jet fiends are getting high off the literal stink lines coming off Brahmin poop. It's enough to invert a man's stomach. Ugh. The Salvatores has some secret business deals with the Enclave going, trading chemical supplies for laser weaponry. The Bishops are secretly collaborating with the NCR, and the Wrights, well, they don't have much, besides lots of children in the Wright family. Around 20 or so biological Wright children. Mr. Orville Wright, yeah, of airplane invention fame. Must be the strongest pipe layer in New Reno, I guess. He definitely took the Kama Sutra master perk. But despite the Wright family's relative weakness, they may have some info on a military base to the north if we get in their good graces. And lastly in New Reno, there's Golgotha to the south. A massive, open-air graveyard where all the New Reno families dump the bodies of those they whacked. The whole place standing as a monument to the brutal society of New Reno, and a reminder of the four families' power. It's full of robbable graves with some pretty humorous headstones, and I even dug up Lenny's still-alive ghoul father in one of them, who was buried alive after being kidnapped from New Reno, after the residents mistook him for a corpse, and he walks off grumbling, telling his son that there's no time to chat right now. New Reno has plenty of activities to do. You can choose to work for any of the four families and become a made man by doing their respective short quest lines, and even become a porn star if you pass an audition for a porno film, if you have the proper stats, which along with a perk, Kama Sutra Master, you can choose to become the Johnny Sins of Fallout. There's even a sex rating mechanic for your character that's based on your charisma, endurance, agility, and strength, with unlockable titles like Sexpert, where if you have sex 10 times, you get a permanent boost to your sex rating. You can get married in game. You can even bang the head of the Bishop family's daughter, Angela, if we speak to her. And if you have no Jimmy hats in your inventory when you pipe her down, New Reno's ending slide will tell you about how Angela had a son who was unusually independent and skilled, wandering the wasteland for fun and becoming the head of the Bishop family without ever meeting his real father. So yeah, you can sire your own little bastard if you want. Fallout 2 definitely takes the cake for the highest volume of gooner mechanics in the series, and we'll be coming and going from New Reno plenty of times. It's sort of the hub of Fallout 2. So for now, I head to Renesco's shop, and seeing that I have the look of a tribal, he calls me a sun-worshipping primate. So upon hearing this, I take the time to regale him with my tribal life story, including the time I snuck out of Arroyo to pipe down Reyna, whose legs crushed with strength of 1,000 snakes, as Renesco just glares at me and tries to explode my head with his incel rage. But we buy the part from him anyway, and head back to fix the mine's filtration system. To do this, we just gotta bum rush to the machine in the top right corner of the mine and kill any critters in our way. And every so often, you'll take around 10 to 15 damage from huffing in radon gas, but once you use the part on the filter, you're good, and you won't take any more damage. And with that, we can tell Lenny to stay put and recruit my guy Marcus to join my quest.
You want me to come along with you? What the hell? I'm too old to settle down. We going now?
And getting a super mutant companion is just so damn cool. Marcus has plenty of health and his minigun does insane damage at this point in the game, but he can easily misfire and brutally gun down you or your other companions if you're anywhere near his firing line. And Marcus really loved obliterating Sulik on those random encounter battles. Also, he can't equip armor due to his girth, and I guess he farts like a lot. He often says, "Phew you, did someone cut a muffin?" And he constantly talks about having massive wedgies. Like, I don't know, man. You smelt it, you dealt it, bro. But now it's probably time to go get that car and speed up these excruciatingly slow travel times. So after hoofing it back to the den, I hand Smitty the caps and part, and now I'm a true road warrior. The Highwayman is a fantastic upgrade for the Chosen One. We now travel 4 times as fast on the map, which feels so damn good to see after getting used to that slow-ass walking speed. And random encounters are now 50% less likely to occur, and the car comes with a trunk that we can use as mobile storage, that we can dump extra guns and armor I want to sell, and other junk to unclutter my inventory. It's a really helpful feature. Getting the car also gives you some groovy new map screen music. car does come with some downsides though, as you need to keep the car fueled with microfusion cells or small energy cells, which aren't super cheap or easy to find. And I had a glitch where I parked my car in the desert to save, and my car just completely vanished. Gone. It ripped open a gash in space-time and slipped into the fourth paradigm when I wasn't looking. And I had stupidly saved before realizing that my car was completely gone, so I had to respawn it back in with a save file editor. So watch out for any disappearing cars. But besides that, this thing is a fucking beast, and it makes traveling the map so much faster and way less rage-inducing. And I think it's always worth it to get the Highwayman in each playthrough. But you could literally pull up in a foreign, and these Wastelanders will still call you tribal trash. So you can't win. But now that I've got some wheels, I somehow stuff Marcus into the back seat of this thing, and we're ready to head to Vault 15. And I head down to Vault 15, but first stop at the nearby settlement of Shady Sands. I know exactly where it is from Fallout 1. But when I stop in, it's looking a lot bigger than I remember. In the time since Fallout 1, the humble town of Shady Sands has now grown into the new California Republic, a society based on pre-war democratic ideology and values. They got a Congress and a president, and they've even got their own budding oligarchs and startup, quote-unquote, Brahmin barons, like Mr. Weston. Although they aren't as aggressively expansionist as they are in Fallout New Vegas, they still aren't afraid to use subterfuge and real hardball politicking to bring other settlements into their fold. Also, another pro tip for you. NCR cops won't let you brandish guns while in the city, and this extends to your companions too. If they have their weapons out, they'll take issue with that and start screaming at you before opening fire on your party. So to avoid this, I just tell my companions to wait outside the city walls, and I pick them up on the way out instead of telling them to individually put away their weapons. It's quicker just to tell them to freeze. So we enter NCR, and it's the nicest place in the wasteland besides Vault City. Clean streets, large buildings and businesses, and it's even got that luxurious mowed grass and trees. And I talked to the sheriff, who says that President Tandy is looking for someone to do a job for her, involving Vault 15. So we head on over to the Congress Hall and try to speak to her. And outside of the hall is a massive statue of our Gramps, a monument to the Vault Dweller who exterminated the Rad Scorpions and freed Tandy from the Cons. This support giving Shady Sands the opportunities it needed to establish itself and grow into the massive society it is today. The Vault Dweller himself becoming a folk hero of the NCR. So we stop in and speak to Tandy, who's way older now. Way older. She's looking like a calcified potato or something. Tough scene. And I think in the game, she's supposed to be 96 years old here. God damn, that explains it. But once we get to talking to her, we realize that she's still the same lively girl that we saved in Fallout 1.
I used to envy him that. I wanted a life of adventure, but I stayed here and took over as mayor when my dad died. Been running this place and building NCR ever since. Guess it turned out to be a pretty big life after all.
Tandy has been president of NCR for the last 55 years or so, getting elected to the position after her father Aradesh and First Ranger Seth vanished into the wastes, searching for the Vault Dweller and Vault 13. And she proved herself to be elite at statecraft and wasteland politics. And the NCR has grown from the humble town of Shady Sands to a confederation of 5 whole-ass states under her leadership. Shady, Los Angeles, Hub, Maxon, and Dayglow, encompassing most of the original Fallout 1 map. And we asked Tandy about her problem, and she says that she wants to regain access to Vault 15, saying that since Shady Sands was founded by Vault 15 dwellers, it's their rightful property, and they want to strip it for parts and any other tech that may be left in there. But there's a bit of a snag. A bunch of homeless squatters have set up a settlement there, and the NCR doesn't want to just come in guns blazing and mow them all down and take the vault by force. Well, not yet at least. So I offer my diplomat services to Tandy, and head on over to Vault 15 next door. And once there, we find the squatters' encampment, called the Squat. Not very creative, but it'll do. And a local woman asks us to help her find her missing daughter, who we can find down a hidden trail being held captive by some raider types in a building. So I free her by intimidating this punk, using some hound intimidation tactics, with essentially him going, "You're gonna die for this girl?" And Jarthan responds,
"Someone is."
And we free her and take her back to the Squat, but she runs off flailing her arms like a woman possessed. Her fleeing animation is fucking hilarious.
Why are you running?
And doing this gets us in the good graces of the squatters, their leader giving us a key to access Vault 15, which is now no longer under a decrepit shack and is now accessed via a cliffside door for some reason. And he also says that Vault 15 is actually currently inhabited by raiders, the new Khans, who had moved into Vault 15 and are now using the squatters as a cover from the NCR to carry out their raider activities undisturbed. And I also strike a deal with the squatters' leader. Let the NCR annex them in Vault 15, and NCR will provide skills training and protection for the squatters. But before we go, he recommends that we take out the Khan's leader Darien before reporting back to the NCR. Otherwise, the raiders will be able to prepare and fortify Vault 15 for an NCR attack, and a bloodbath would likely follow. So we head into the vault, and we convince the guards that we're just Pat the Raider, and they're just like, my bad, didn't recognize you, buddy. And they'll let us move freely throughout the vault. But if you fail this check, you'll have to shoot your way through the entire place, which isn't easy. There's like 10 of these guard goons per vault level. But at the lowest level of the vault, we can find the new Khan's leader, Darien, who we learn from this kidnapped doctor was the sole survivor of the Vault Dwellers massacre of the Khans when he freed Tandy, canonizing the Khan extermination ending. And Darien, who was Garl Deathhand's son, has lived with survivor's guilt for not dying with his father and gang, and has held a deep hatred for Tandy and the NCR ever since. But like Tandy, this would also make him insanely old, at least in like his mid-90s, unless he was a literal single-digit age child during the Vault Dwellers Khan culling. But that would still make him well over 80 years old. And he's looking pretty spry for a guy who's about the same age as Joe Biden. And he attacks us on sight without the opportunity for me to smooth talk him into giving up, yelling about how I'm some kind of paragon of virtue and kindness, and then he immediately initiates combat. But it's not an easy fight whatsoever. Darien has 4 extra guards and a dog to back him up. And the guards in combat armor in the back line are armed with high damage burst fire assault rifles as well. And Jarthin is way too weak to take on these guys right now. So I take a page out of Rush's book and do a tactical regrouping, not a retreat, and instead head east from Vault 15 and drive on over to the city of San Francisco. I'll talk more in detail about San Fran later, as I'm mostly here to talk to one man, the Brotherhood of Steel agent Matthew, at his lonely Brotherhood outpost. I haven't mentioned these guys yet, but in the Den and in the NCR, there's some Brotherhood outposts that we can spot, each attended by one lonely NPC in metal armor. They seem to know a lot about us, but they're very vague as to the sources of their information, and they mostly exist to point you towards important locations and story beats. But Matthew here is much more willing to talk than the other Brotherhood of Steel agents. He says that the Brotherhood has been in decline since Fallout 1, and with the emergence of the Enclave, they had gone to ground and had begun monitoring their activities, learning that the Enclave is involved in weapons, drugs, and slave trades to fund their mainland operations, and the Brotherhood realized that they have no way to compete with the Enclave's resources and technology. The Enclave makes the Brotherhood look like a broke-ass third-world militia in comparison, and this Enclave has advanced, never-before-seen power armor. Each soldier is equipped with an arsenal of powerful energy weapons, and they even have functioning vertibird helicopters to transport them to and from their unknown HQ. And seeing functional military helicopters in the wasteland must be like seeing a polar bear in Arlington, Texas, and the Brotherhood is very interested in these flying machines. Matt here tells us that they had discovered the Enclave had set up a vertibird refueling and maintenance base called Navarro, which is to the north of San Francisco. And if we were to infiltrate Navarro and steal the vertibird schematics for him, Matt will let us access this Brotherhood outpost and let us take whatever goodies are inside, which is very, very worth it. So I agree to snag those plans and drive on up to Navarro. And when I arrive, I'm met by this suspiciously cloaked man attending an abandoned gas station. I ask him about joining the Enclave, and he assumes that we're a replacement soldier. So this overly trusting fella tells me where to find Navarro, and I leave Marcus and Sulik behind to begin my infiltration. We're first directed to find the sergeant in charge here and report in, and we speak to Sergeant Arch Dornan, and we're treated to one of the greatest voice acting performances in a video game.
Welcome to Camp Navarro. So you're the new replacement. You are out of uniform, soldier! Where is your power armor? Don't have any? You expect me to believe that, maggot? The truth is, you lost an expensive piece of Army-issue equipment. That suit is going to come out of your pay, and you will remain in this man's army until you are 510 years old, which is the number of years it will take for you to pay for a Mark II powered combat armor you have lost. Report to the armory and have a new suit issued to you, then report back to me, Private. Dismissed!
Dornan chews us out in a fiery rant because we aren't wearing our power armor, so he commands us to head to the armory and get equipped for guard duty pronto. And this, right here, is why I came here. Jarthin is about to pull the fattest lick of 2241. The armory is this room full of lockers, and we can get away with an absolute sack of gear here. A plasma rifle? Ah, perfect. I was speccing into energy weapons already. 250 rounds of microfusion cells, which is more than enough to last you the entire game, at least in combat, because I use some of these to refuel my car in a pinch. And most importantly, a completely free set of advanced power armor, the best armor set in the entire game, which is ironically way easier to get than power armor in the first game. But now that we have our armor, we return to Dornan, who is quite pleased to see us in uniform.
Excellent! You're in uniform now, so I'm going to give you a rare opportunity.
And gives us another immaculate verbal lashing.
I am not a sir! I work for a living, you moron! You will call me Sergeant or Sergeant Dornan. Do you understand me?
And he then commands us to guard the vertebrate hangar, which we do for a bit.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy, this peace is what all true warriors strive for.
Let's go explore. And we can just abandon our post and explore the base, the other Enclave troops seemingly too shy to call us out on skipping guard duty. But Dornan will patrol the grounds, and if he sees you, he'll make you go back to your post.
Cooper, what are you doing here?
But just stay away from him, and you're pretty much free to go anywhere in the base. I first get the vertebrate plans by lying to the lead mechanic that Raul, the vertebrate engineer in the hangar, needs a new copy of the plans, to which the mechanic will bitch that this is the third time this month that Raul had lost the vertebrate plans, and he lets us take them from the locker behind him. That's speech check number 1 passed. Next, I head to the underground part of Navarro by taking one of these large circular elevators, and I smooth talk a scientist into letting me use the EnclaveNet computer to get some extra information. And he gives me the password Snooky to use. That's speech check number 2. And I then use the computer to learn the location of the Enclave's main base, which appears to be on an oil rig out in the Pacific Ocean, west of San Francisco. And we also learn from the PC that we have 2 main ways of reaching the Enclave oil rig, either via Vertibird or via a large tanker ship that's currently docked in San Francisco Harbor, the PMV Valdez, which is currently deactivated. And a fun Vertibird ride is out of the question, unfortunately. So our only option is to find the Valdez and bring it back online and sail for the Enclave base. And to do that, we need a passkey for the ship that's currently on a fob that's being held by Navarro's commanding officer. So I use my speech skills again and convince the commander and his guard that I'm here to move the fob into a safer storage location, and they buy it hook, line, and sinker. So that's another task done. And also, you may have noticed the Robodog hanging out in this lab room, and that's K9, a cyberdog made by Dr. Schreiber with augmented strength and intelligence, who can now even talk to us in a dog-like robo-voice. But Schreiber here tells us that he made K9 too intelligent, and now the dog hates him for all his morbid experiments that he's doing on animals. And he tells us that we can fix K9 by getting him a K9 motivator from Raul. So we do that, and in order to free K9, we have to kill Schreiber. But luckily, the room is soundproofed, so we can blast his head off without fear of the whole base turning on us. So we kill him, and fix K9 with the part, and bang, new companion. K9 is like a beefed up version of dog meat. He's got a beefy 129 HP to start, and his bites can ignore armor for huge 30 plus damage hits, which is pretty sweet. But after I recruit K9, I try to leave Navarro out of the front gate, but old Sarge Dornan is just standing right at the gate, unmoving, as if he expects me to show up. And I don't know if this is a glitch, or if he just got stuck or what, but I already had saved, and he wasn't budging from this spot. So I had to improvise, and in the Navarro basement, there's a massive intelligent Deathclaw penned up in a room. So I fib my way past the guard and speak to the Deathclaw, who says that he's an intelligent Enclave-made Deathclaw, who can also speak English. Man, a lot of talking animals and mutants in this game so far. And using a keycard that we stole from Schreiber's desk, we free the Deathclaw, and we can then take a secret underground exit to get past Dornan and get back to the gas station. And boom, lit completed. And I'm now, no joke, at least 3 times as strong as I was going in. Man, I love Navarro. But with all this new gear and a buff cyberdog with me, it's time to head back to Vault 15 and take down Darien in my shiny new suit of power armor. And the fight is a one-sided slaughter. Me, Marcus, and K9 all attack Darien and his goons, obliterating Darien with my plasma rifle as K9 mauls his knockdown body, and his backline goons fire wildly at me, killing Darien's evil-ass dog on accident, and this poor dog always gets boomed in this fight. And soon enough, the goons give up and try to run away, but Jarthan takes no prisoners. And once Darien is killed and all the other cons are exterminated on this floor, I use one of the few still working computers to finally find the location of Vault 13 and copy the coordinates to my Pip-Boy. Even if you're a Fallout 1 vet and know exactly where Vault 13 ought to be, you can't enter it until you discover its location like this. And we also find information on one of the computers that Darien has an informant in the NCR Congress. So we take this data and news of Darien's demise back to Tandy, who will pay us $6,000 for killing him, and an additional $4,000 for the info on the informant, for a total of 10,000 smackaroos. And Tandy even says that the spy could be none other than a guy named Fergus, likely a reference to studio boss Fergus Urquhart. But this $10,000 payday from the NCR will keep us liquid for a long while. Also, on the way out, we can walk past this power generator building, and the woman standing outside tells us that a crazy guy with a bomb barged in and is threatening to blow himself and the entire building up, and we have to talk him down from Hezbollahing himself. And it's sort of like a speech puzzle, as if you pick the wrong choice, dude go boom, so you gotta keep him talking, and you learn that he had snapped after his wife cheated on him, divorced him, and then took all his money in alimony. He even claims that she wants him dead. But I convince him to not let her win by blowing himself up. And he agrees, and you get a fat experience boost for defusing this situation. And the funny dialogue just makes this little side quest such a gem. But anyway, we're pretty much wrapped up here at NCR, and we can finally head to the promised land of Vault 13, which is really close by. And we stop in at the classic rat cave that's now completely rat-free. And when we enter Vault 13, after the doors open, a horde of Deathclaws appear inside. But no worries, they're real chill, and like the Navarro Deathclaw, they're all hyper-intelligent and can talk. And we talk to their leader, Gruthar, and ask him what's going on here. You see, these Deathclaws were created by the Enclave by injecting them with modified FEV, hoping to turn them into subservient soldier beasts that they could throw into any battle or situation, making them smart enough to obey commands, but not smart enough to realize that they're expendable slave soldiers. However, like many other Fallout experiments, it worked a bit too well, and the Deathclaws developed human-tier intelligence and the ability to speak. The Enclave then used these Deathclaws to attack Vault 13 and kidnap its residents for some unknown Enclave purposes. But the whole time, the Deathclaws were playing dumb, hiding their true intelligence until they had an opportunity to escape the Enclave. And when the chance to escape presented itself, they returned to Vault 13 to hide from them in this fortified bunker, where they now lead a mostly peaceful life, even taking in wasteland vagrants to come live with them. Now, I've been hearing for ages that these intelligent Deathclaws living in a vault plot was just way too stupid and unserious for Fallout. Many fans point to it as an example of why Fallout 2 is just a goofy-ass game. Which is true. Fallout 2 can be a very goofy and unserious game. All the pop culture references and funny dialogue options are just part of the pretty massive experience that this game has to offer. And it's not all goofs and gaffs. In my opinion, Enclave-made intelligent talking Deathclaws aren't any goofier or more ridiculous than, say, massive vats of green sci-fi goo that turn you into a mutated booger green version of Prime Ronnie Coleman on Contact. And Fallout 2 presents these talking Deathclaws living in a vault with plenty of sincerity. But anyway, we tell the Deathclaw leader Gruthar that we're looking for a Gek, and he proposes a trade with us. He says that the vault's mainframe voice command systems had recently stopped working, and if we can fix it for him, he'll look for a Gek for us and hand it over if he finds one. So we investigate the mainframe, and it looks like Vault 13's residents replaced the Overseer's chair with this large computer obelisk. I guess they got tired of that Neanderthal shit and automated his job. But anyway, we find its voice interface part is fried, and we need to replace it with a new one. So we head out to get one. But once we leave Vault 13, we'll get another spiritual psychic message from Hakunin, and he sounds rough. He says that the village is screwed, fucked, completely foobarred, and he pleads with us to hurry back right away.
The village dies. All of our futures die too.
So I drive on all the way up to Arroyo, and when we arrive, we find that the bridge to Arroyo has been destroyed and see an injured Hakunin laying on the ground. Hakunin tells us that one of the greatest games of all time showed up in Arroyo and fucked the place up good.
Dark Souls game. They took everyone.
Just kidding. Even on his deathbed, he can't help but talk in his spiritual metaphor style. But basically, he says that the Enclave showed up in vertibirds, killed any tribals who resisted, and then abducted the rest of the villagers, and flew them south towards Camp Navarro. But we just got back from that place, and they weren't there. Well, so much for needing a Gek. We now gotta save our village from an Enclave gulag. Otherwise, there won't even be an Arroyo to save. And Hakunin then dies after relaying this information to us. So now our main goal is to find and save the people of Arroyo, and getting a Gek is now a secondary objective. But it's still important to secure one. So for now, I drive back down to Reno and get a Vault-Tec voice interface part from New Reno Arms after I ask the shopkeeper for some specialty parts. So I shell out the steep asking price of $3,000 and return to Vault 13. But before I go, I have K9 stay put so I can pick up a new companion. This oddly shaped cloak figure named Goris, who's chilling in Vault 13's library. Goris is a friendly, self-described scholar who says that he's traveling the wasteland and studying the different societies here, and we can offer him to come travel with us, to which he happily agrees. Now, the game tries to hide Gorrus's identity under his huge robe, but honestly, it's pretty obvious that he's a Deathclaw in disguise. Like, I mean, what human is built like this besides the Hunchback of Notre Dame? And his name matches the other Deathclaw naming conventions, and in combat, he reveals himself as an albino Deathclaw and attacks. Yeah, go white boy, go. And having a damn Deathclaw as a companion, like Marcus, is just so damn cool to see. It's something that's so conceptually out there, you need mods just to get a similar experience in the later Fallouts. And I'm all for it here. The range of wasteland species you can recruit as companions is excellent. The only issue with Gorrus is that he has to take the time to dramatically throw off his cloak and then put it back on at the beginning and end of combat, which adds like 5 extra seconds to every combat engagement, every single time. And we then tell Gruthar that we fixed the vault mainframe, and he graciously thanks us and hands us a Gek he found lying around in vault storage. Sweet, half of our quest complete, and we then head out. And at this point in the game, we're in what I would consider to be the mid to late game, where our next tasks are going to be focused on tying up any loose ends in the wasteland and preparing to head to the Enclave oil rig. So I first return to San Fran to give Matthew the vertebrate plans, and he makes a copy, and he allows us to access the Brotherhood Vault, which is full of even more extremely juicy gear. The rich just keep getting richer. We can collect a set of T-51B power armor, around 130 more rounds of microfusion cells, and a YK-32 pulse pistol, and a YK-42B pulse rifle. This pulse rifle being one of the best weapons in the entire game. It does pretty rare electrical damage. It was my weapon of choice from here on out. And we also get access to the Brotherhood's Ace computer, which can upgrade our special stats by 1 if we find the corresponding memory modules out in the world. And using the blue charisma model I found in the Navarro Armory, I used the computer to upgrade my charisma to 6, which will allow me to assemble a wild wasteland entourage of a robed albino talking Deathclaw, a friendly super mutant who farts a lot, and a cybernetic talking dog all to come with me. My first stop is to New Reno, to help out the Wright family. We can talk to the Patriarch Orville to get a quest to investigate the death of one of his sons, Richard, who apparently had died of a jet overdose. But Papa Wright thinks there's more to it, so we put the detective hat on and get to investigating. And long story short, we eventually learned that the jet was laced with rad scorpion venom, laced by Renesco under the orders of his bosses, the Salvatores, so the Wright kid would die after taking a huff, to send a blow to the Wright family. So we tell Orville the Salvatores did it, but he says he can't move against them. They have way too much firepower and laser weaponry from their Enclave deals. But Orville knows of a hidden military depot to the north, and if we could find a way in and report back to him, the Wrights would be able to loot the place and its weaponry, and be able to strike back at the Salvatores. So we go to find it, and come across the Sierra Army Depot, its front gate littered with corpses, all gunned down by the depot's automatic machine gun turrets. And this is another reason why I got the advanced power armor. These turrets are lethal, and can easily one-shot you or your companions if they land their shots right. And my best bet was to snipe these turrets from a distance using my new pulse rifle. And the entrance is sealed up tight, so in order to get inside, we have to do a sort of small puzzle by lockpicking this building over here, looting a howitzer shell from a crate inside, loading it into a howitzer, and then firing it to blow a hole in the front door. Now for the Wright family, all you need to do is blow a hole in that door open and report back to Orville. But if you head inside, you can actually search the place for yourself. And the Sierra Army Depot is a whole optional dungeon that you can clear if you want. Although I don't recommend you do it unless you have a pretty high repair skill, as you'll need this skill to lower the force fields inside. And if you fail to lower the force fields 3 times in a row, you'll trip the security systems, and then you now have to fight off legions of robots armed with missile launchers and rifles. And the main goal of the Sierra Army Depot is to find and build a RoboBrain body for the depot's AI, which is called Skynet. Yeah, huge Terminator reference, giving you access to a customizable robot companion if you fully clear the Sierra Army Depot. And in this playthrough, I explored the depot a little bit, but didn't get too far. I got sick of constantly tripping the security systems while fucking with the force fields, and eventually just bailed out. And then I next moved to finally take out those raiders who have been harassing Vault City. Remember those guys? Well, they're holed up in a cave, which is rigged with tons of booby traps that blow your socks off. But I'll be damned before I invest points into traps. Ouch. And when I first discovered their base, it was behind 2 locked gates, and there were like 15 plus heavily armed goons inside the cave, which I had no hope of defeating at the time. So I left. Until now, and I kick the doors down and liquefy most of the goons with help from Marcus, who is now wielding my plasma rifle, and the dude is a crack shot with it from his Unity days. Plus Gorrus and K9 add plenty of extra damage, and once all the raiders are dead, we can loot some dog tags out of their personal lockers after spamming lockpicks on them. each tag having a number that opens up a safe in the base that holds a logbook of payments from Mr. Bishop, exposing his involvement in this raider scheme. So we run this info back to that turbo bitch Lynette, who says that Bishop had recently visited Vault City and suggested an alliance, but Vault City refused. They could tolerate slavery, but drug dealing is a bridge too far for them. And Lynette then says she'd rather join the NCR than ally with New Reno. Excellent choice, woman. Glory to the new California Republic. And with that done, I then move on to Redding, which I mostly ignored until now, because the main activities here are focused around the Great Wanamingo Mine. Mayor Escorti here can sell us the deed to the Great Wanamingo Gold Mine for a relatively cheap-ass price of $1,000 bucks. But there's a catch. The mine is infested with Wanamingos, a new type of mutant in Fallout 2, and one of the strangest mutants in the entire series. Sometimes they're just referred to as aliens by the game, which makes sense. They look like walking xenomorph heads with tentacle arms that they use to deck you and your party, as despite their small stature, these Wanamingos are some beasts. They have 120 health points at a minimum, and this mother Wanamingo near the elevator has a whopping 220 HP. And they all have very high armor class and damage resistance, and they're great at scoring critical hits and knocking you on your ass with their Squidward tentacles. And you'll need the best late game weapons to really hit these freaks hard. But with my pulse rifle, Marcus, Goris, and K9 all backing me up, we fry these aliens without too much trouble. As for where the Wanamingos came from, and what kind of mutant they are, there's very little information or lore to these guys. They're just kinda here. Marge LaBarge says that she heard a rumor that they were summoned by Native American spirits to punish the white man for nuking the planet, but I doubt the validity of this theory. And to get the answer, we gotta see what Mr. Avalone says in his Fallout Bible, and it seems that the Wanamingos were originally supposed to be part of a pre-war experiment to create creatures that could be used in warfare, and they would have been more closely tied to a cut EPA location in Fallout 2. But Chris Avalone himself personally wasn't a fan of the Wanamingos, and he mentions that they have a, quote, genetic dead man switch that will kill off all the Wanamingos 5 years after the events of Fallout 2, which explains their absence from the rest of the series. And I agree with Mr. Avalone. Their design is way more alien than mutant, and they don't really fit into the setting or lore very much in my opinion. And I respect Chris Avalone for having enough hater energy to genocide the entire species off screen. And we also need to head into this mine in order to find a mining chip that's on this bikini bottom Squidward crushing machine looking doohickey, and hand it over to either Dangerous Dan McGrew, the owner of the Morningstar mine, or hand it over to Marge LaBarge, the owner of the Cocoa Weef mine, which is misspelled as the Cocoa Weeby mine in the status screen. Handing over this chip also means taking a side on what faction you want to have control over Redding. Danger Dan wants New Reno to take control, as he believes that they'd afford Redding the most freedom and autonomy over the NCR or Vault City control, while Marge wants the NCR to take control, as they'd provide much more law and stability. And being an NCR sympathizer, and thinking that letting New Reno, the city that's currently trying to turn Redding into a mining colony worked by jet addicts who are practically enslaved to their New Reno overlords, probably isn't the greatest idea. So I hand the chip to Marge LaBarge and finish up here in Redding, and start moving towards San Francisco yet again, our second to last destination on our journey. But near San Francisco, we can stop by the old Mariposa military base, which is now seemingly abandoned and caved in by rocks, and vagrant dogs roam the area. And like the Sierra Army Depot, we get inside by completing a sort of point-and-click puzzle, where we have to find a metal pole, attach it to this minecart, attach dynamite to said pole, and then interact with the minecart to blow up the caved-in rocks and enter the base. And I had to look up the solution to this one. I had no idea you had to use a metal pole to ram the dynamite into the rocks. And once inside the base, we find it's full of Enclave corpses and super mutants. And we can pick up holodiscs all throughout the base to tell the story of what's happened here since Fallout 1. In 2236, about 5 years before the game takes place, Enclave scouts had discovered the Mariposa military base, all exploded up and caved in thanks to the Vault Dwellers' handiwork. But undeterred, the Enclave began abducting wastelanders to work as slaves to excavate the base, to reach the remains of the FEV vats at the bottom. However, the slaves weren't given any protective equipment, and they had begun mutating after being exposed to the latent FEV in the place. One of the Enclave enforcers, a man named Frank Horgan, was also exposed to the FEV, but he was taken back to the Enclave oil rig for further experimentation. And they eventually reached the bottom, and Enclave scientists got their sample of FEV that they needed. But shortly after, the mutant slaves, knowing that they'd be killed once the excavations were complete, revolted against the Enclave guards and slaughtered a good amount of them, forcing the Enclave to seal the base back up and abandon it, where the mutants still lurk inside. And despite the military base's importance to this game's story, and the first game, the Mariposa military base, like the Sierra Army Depot, is also a completely optional dungeon, and it's there to explore if you really want to test your combat skills and loot a war chest of valuable gear out of it. These optional dungeons making Fallout 2 feel much larger than Fallout 1. The hardest dungeon in the first game is now just some side content here to reward players who take the time to fully explore each location. And it's a very tough dungeon. All these super mutants have powerful laser weaponry, and like other late-game Fallout 2 combat encounters, it's you versus a gang squad of them. And there's even a secret mutant boss at the bottom of the base named Melchior, who can summon up Deathclaws, fire geckos, floaters, and mole rats from the FEV goo, somehow willing this goo into giving spontaneous birth to wasteland mutants. And the explanation for this inexplicable life creation power is that Melchior was a hobbyist magician before he got abducted by the Enclave. So I think this might be a bit of a joke fight, but once we're done at Mariposa, we can then head to San Francisco for real, to prepare the PMV Valdez to sail to the Enclave oil rig. San Francisco is home to 2 major factions and 1 minor faction, the Shi, the Hubologists, and the Tanker Vagrants. The Shi are the descendants of the original crew of the Shi Huang Ti, a Chinese submarine that beached near San Francisco after the Great War, and they developed their own society in the Chinatown district of the city, led by an unseen emperor. The Shi are skilled doctors and mechanics, being one of the more advanced factions in the Wasteland, although they're highly reclusive and stay out of most Wasteland politics. The Hubologists, on the other hand, are a massive parody of Scientology, founded by a pre-war author named Dick Hubble, aka simply The Hub, which is a parody on Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard's name. Hubologists believe that Dick Hubble contacted a deity from outer space, only known as the Starfather, who allegedly lives on the planet Quetzal, the Starfather being the Hubologist version of Xenu, I presume. In order to unlock their full potential and commune with the Starfather, the Hubologists are planning to use this giant space shuttle to fly to Quetzal and meet the Starfather, and unlock magical powers, somehow, and then return to Earth and guide humanity to a bright new future with their brand new Hubbian space powers. But in the meantime, they mostly focus on cleansing neurodynes from their followers. And what's a neurodyne, you may ask? Well, like in real-life Scientology, they believe that humans are tormented by engrams, which as far as I understand, are essentially traumatic spiritual memories given to humans by ancient spirits of the dead that cause negative effects on the mind. And in order to remove these engrams and heal your mind completely, Scientologists undergo a process called auditing, which supposedly removes these engrams from the body and soul. And in Fallout 2, instead of engrams, they're called neurodynes, and auditing is known as an alignment, but it essentially serves the same purpose. And if you need any more proof that's just a goofy Scientology parody, there's even 2 Hubologist presenters talking to some new converts, whose names are Juan Cruz and Vicky Goldman, 2 famous porn stars from New Reno, which is a big joke about Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, who were married at the time Fallout 2 came out, and both were outspoken Scientologists at the time. And the Hubologists came about before the Great War even occurred, making them one of the very few pre-war factions who survived the nuclear apocalypse, by hiding in a large bunker in San Francisco, later emerging to spread the good word about the hub, and to fix up their shuttle to fly to Quetzal. And finally, there's the Tanker Vagrants, a loose faction of squatters and drifters living in the hull of the PMV Valdez, the same ship that we need to fix up and take to the oil rig. And we can also have a burp contest with their technician. We first need to gain the trust of the Tanker Vagrants and their captain by completing a quest for them. Otherwise, their leader will refuse to speak to you and tell you how to get the ship up and running again. And to get in their good graces, we can speak to this guy Chip, who seems to be in a lot of pain. And when we ask him what the problem is, he reveals that in a moment of drunken weakness, he had recently sold his spleen to the owner of the Flying Dragon 8 shop, Lao Cho, which is one of the best shops in the game, by the way. It's usually stocked with a reliable supply of microfusion cells. So we speak to Lao Cho, who says that Chip had bet his spleen in a game of cards and lost it. Lao then harvested it and sold it to a Shi doctor named Wong. And we then speak to Wong, who says that he plans to eat the spleen with fava beans and a nice Chianti. So we spit a Silence of the Lambs quote right back at him, saying that you eat liver with wine, not spleen, which grosses Dr. Wong out, not realizing that it was a human spleen. So he gives it back. And I think this is the first time I've ever had to use a pop culture reference to advance a quest in a video game. And we then arranged for another Shi doctor to put it back in Chip's body for $1,000. You owe me one, Chip. But once we get his spleen reinstalled, we can now speak to the Vagrant captain. And he says that he used to serve in the Enclave, until he realized he wasn't fighting for the America he envisioned, and was rather just serving the whims of the Enclave elite of genocidal oligarchs. So he deserted, and ended up running the settlement here in the Valdez. And he says in order to get this puppy up and sailing again, we need the key fob and some navcom parts, which need to be installed in the ship's main computer. The only problem is that the route to the ship's computer is blocked by a horde of strong and scary mutants that are infesting the cargo hold. And we'd also need to either convince the Hubologists or the Shi to lend us fuel for the ship. And once that's all complete, the Valdez will be ready to roll. And we already got the fob from Navarro, and the Navcom parts can be found in Vault 13 in some random locker on the 3rd level. So I head out to go grab it. I missed it the last time I was there. But when we roll up to Vault 13 and enter, we find all the Deathclaws dead. Blood splattered everywhere. And we can check the Vault mainframe to see security footage of what happened. And it looked like the Enclave had found their lost Deathclaws. And we see Frank Horrigan confront and then punch Gruthar so hard he explodes. And all the while, Marcus is just casually strolling through this alleged security feed. After a little bit of time passes after receiving the Gek from the Deathclaws, I think it's either 2 weeks or a month in game, the Enclave will attack and then massacre all the Deathclaws in Vault 13, leaving only Gorus alive. So be ready for that. And if you want the Deathclaws to live on, you must never return to Vault 13. But there's nothing we can do for the Deathclaws now besides get revenge on the Enclave. So I grab the Navcom parts and return to San Francisco. And we now need to install those parts, which means we gotta get through the mutant-infested cargo hold, which is sort of a late-game combat check to make sure that you're ready and strong enough to head to the oil rig. It's full of floaters, centaurs, and beefed-up Wanamingos, so be ready for a pretty tough and a very long fight. But once you wipe the mutants, we can install the parts in the computer, and that's 2 of the 3 tasks done. Now all that's left to do is to get chummy with either the Shi or the Hobologists, so we can get some fuel. And there is a secret 3rd option. If you save the burping man's girlfriend from the mutants in the cargo hold, he'll break into one of the faction's bases and reroute the fuel for us. But if you send him to get fuel from the Shi, their enforcers will show up and kill the poor guy in revenge. So I'll skip that route. And we choose who to side with by handing the vertibird plans to our faction of choice. And I'll ally myself with the Shi. I'd prefer to help out these quirky Chinese scientists over those Hobologist freaks. So I head over to the Shi base, which has this imperial-looking room with an empty throne in the center, attended by this doctor-looking NPC named Ken Lee. And we ask to see the Emperor so we can beg for gas for our ship. But nobody sees the Emperor unless they're approved to do so. So we hand over the plans, and after that, Lee kicks our shit up to 11, and he asks us to murder AHS-9, the current Hobologist leader, which means that we'll likely have to murder the entire Hobologist base just to get to AHS-9. Oh well. So I perform Anonymous's wet dream on the Hobologists and slaughter HS9 and anyone who comes to his defense. Yeah, try lying those Neurodynes now, bitch. But be careful. When you attack, all the force fields in the base will go up, and if you don't have a good enough repair skill or means to destroy the force field generators, you can get a little stuck. So be prepared for that. But once we massacre the Hobologists, we're finally allowed to see the Emperor of the Shi, who is a massive computer that was refurbished from their submarine. The Emperor isn't exactly an AI. Rather, it's more of a predicting machine that guesses the likeliness of events to happen based on all available data. And when we talk to it, we can see a few of its predictions. There's a 95% chance for the Hobologist ship to explode. The Taker vagrants have a 0% chance of getting off their buns and killing the cargo hold mutants themselves. There's a 15% chance the Chosen One succeeds in our quest. Alright, fine. Keep doubting. The ship grows bigger. And a 0% chance of the submarine reappearing in the game. Wait, hold on. Originally, the Shi Huang Ti submarine was supposed to be in the game, sitting in the water between the Valdez and the open sea, and there would have been an additional step to disable the submarine's weapon systems to sail past it safely, as it would automatically attack any passing US vessels, but the submarine was ultimately cut from the game, the only memory of it remaining being this fourth wall shattering joke from the Emperor. And although it would have been pretty cool to see the submarine, I'm still glad it was cut. It would have just made this pretty long sequence of prepping the Valdez feel dragged out even longer. But once we acquire the fuel, we're ready to set sail for the oil rig, and we see a cutscene of the ship coming back to life and chaotically disembarking from the rusty harbor. And we then sail into the maw of the oil rig, the ship's computer welcoming us to the Enclave. And we disembark and are greeted by some Art Deco facepipes. And we enter the main lobby, which has the sweet stone mural on the floor in the middle of the room. We can either explore the barracks or the detention and research halls. Now you can try and attack the base and fight your way through, but that's all you can do. Try. Each room is jam-packed with power-armored Enclave goons, powerful machine gun turrets, rocket-launching security bots, and even guys in suits of T-51B power armor, who the Enclave are using as human forklifts. And if you try to fight, your ass is grass. And brother, they just brought the mower out. So like Navarro, we gotta act like we belong and move undetected. And as long as we're suited up in some advanced power armor, we can move pretty much freely throughout the oil rig. And if you have any companions, especially any mutants like Marcus, just leave them parked in the entry hall. It seems no Enclave guards come to check the place, so you're good. Otherwise, you'll be attacked on sight if you have them following you. And as we explore the rig and the detention cells, we soon find our tribe locked up and speak to the Elder, who says that many of the captured villagers were killed after being experimented on with FEV, and she tasks us with freeing the villagers and destroying the oil rig. And we then have to get past this honestly very annoying puzzle room, where you have to interact with the terminals in the correct sequence to remotely open doors to progress. The whole time, the electrified floor is shocking you and constantly interrupting your interactions, and it's not very intuitive or interesting of a puzzle, just a bit of an annoying roadblock more than anything. And once we pass this puzzle room, we can enter the presidential level of the oil rig, and we spot what looks like a pretty presidential looking man standing near a large desk and a map. And when we confront him, we learn that his name is Dick Richardson. He's the current president of the United States of America.
Hello, I'm the President of the United States of America, and you are...
We ask him what's going on, and he gives us a little bit of a history lesson. He tells us about the Great War and how America almost won it until those damn dirty Reds hit the big red button and air-fried the globe. However, the Enclave, a deep state of politicians, military officials, business owners, and scientists, had all foresaw the nuclear apocalypse and had prepared this oil rig and the vaults as a contingency plan. And he then drops a truth nuke on us, as when we ask him why did so many vaults fail and end in disaster, Richardson reveals that it was all by design. The vaults were made to test human reactions to dire situations.
The vaults were set up to test humanity. Some had not enough food synthesizers. Others had only men in them. Yet others were designed to open after only 6 months. They each had a unique set of circumstances designed to test the occupants.
Now these experiments, as they're explained in Fallout 2, just seemingly makes the Enclave look extra evil for no clear practical reason. But it makes more sense if you look at Tim Kane's original idea for the Vault experiments in the Enclave. Originally, the Enclave's grand plan was not to exterminate all life on Earth, and rather, their plan was to build a massive spaceship that would go on a multi-generational voyage to another planet that was untouched by nuclear devastation, and the vaults were designed to test any sort of problem or scenario being sealed in a large starship for several decades may cause. And in that context, it makes a lot more sense for the vaults to be so scary and sadistic, as any number of things could go wrong on a spaceship that's flying for 100 years or more. But if the Enclave had actually planned to build a starship to fly to another planet, by the time Fallout 2 takes place, those plans were seemingly abandoned long ago. And Dick also tells us the true purpose of Vault 13, which was designed to remain closed indefinitely, until the Enclave needed pristine test subjects who weren't affected by wasteland mutations and radiation, which we can see them collect on in the intro of the game. And the water chip malfunctioning was a genuine accident that the Enclave didn't account for. They screwed up the water chip shipment and accidentally sent it to Vault 8, remember? So I guess the Vault will really bailed them out there. And not only that, his exile and the founding of Arroyo also gave the Enclave an ideal stock of freshly mutated humans to test on. And thanks to these tests, the Enclave is nearly ready to put their master plan into motion. Using the FEV samples recovered from the Mariposa military base and modifying it through human experimentation, the Enclave has created a new strain of FEV that can kill humans with maximum efficiency. Anyone exposed to this new FEV who hasn't been inoculated against it will die a horrific death, and the Enclave plans to unleash it into the jet stream and disperse it all across the world to wipe it clean of life, where the Enclave would then move in and reestablish the USA as it used to be, so they can finally return to spending billions on meddling in foreign affairs again.
The project will cleanse all the mutants from our fair land, and the rest of the globe. Once again, America will be the world's policeman. Fuck yeah!
So we asked Dick why he's doing this, and if he ever wonders that he may be wrong about global genocide, but he's fully committed to this plan. He's already dehumanized wastelanders in his mind as mutants who need to be culled, and we can't convince him otherwise. But he also lets slip that most Enclave staff haven't actually been inoculated yet, but they will be soon. Any minute now. It's no big deal at all. And we reach a dead end with Richardson here, at least with our words. Some of these Enclave guys are stubborn to a fault. However, President Richardson has a valuable presidential access card on his body that will let us take control of the oil rig's computer systems. So I enter sneak, aim for the eyes, and crisp the president. And it seems if you kill Richardson in one hit, it won't alert the base. All these Enclave goons are blissfully unaware that I just barbecued their president. And I swipe his keycard, and I now have to take the staircase behind his office to sabotage the main reactor of the oil rig. But just planting explosives on the main reactor will cause all the Enclave goons on the floor to jump your ass. So to blow this thing without issue, we can talk to the head of the chemical corps in the room to the right. We asked Dr. Curling why he wants to kill everyone on Earth who doesn't live on the Enclave oil rig, and he tells us that since Wastelander DNA is subtly different to theirs, they're non-human and must be eradicated to make way for the real humans. But we then tell him that our DNA may be different, sure, but we're still just as human as they are, and there's nothing inherently wrong with humans being born in a wasteland life and any mutations that may come along with it. And that's all Dr. Curling needs. And he essentially says, co-signed, because that's some real shit you wrote. And he agrees that killing all humans on Earth would be a bit too mean and nasty. And he then inoculates us against the modified FEV, and he releases it into the oil rig, which violently kills any Enclave goon not in power armor if we pass the time with the Pip-Boy, including all the scientists guarding the reactor, so we can then plant some explosives completely unbothered. And this wouldn't be a classic Fallout game without triggering a self-destruct sequence. We have 10 minutes on the timer to escape, and all that's left to do is return the way we came through the main lobby. But that beast Frank Horrigan is waiting for us at the door. So we speak to Frank, who spits some classic lines at us with some great voice acting, sounding just as imposing as he looks.
You've gotten a lot farther than you should have, but then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Mutie. Time to die.
And I try to reason with him a bit, but Frank ain't having it. Like Cameron said at the Temple of Trials, sometimes you can't just talk it out, and you just gotta kill. And Frank is as beastly as he looks. He's got a whopping 999 HP, 10s in all his special stats, and is wielding 2 weapons that are literally called the N-Boss Plasma Gun and the N-Boss Knife. And he's backed up by 7. Count them. 7 auto turrets. And going into this fight raw is pretty much suicide. However, we can turn from the ganked to the ganker by doing a few things. Firstly, we can talk to the leader of this Enclave squad and convince him that fighting against us is pointless. The oil rig is gonna blow up anyway, and if they help us kill Frank, they'll be able to escape with us and get on with their lives. And passing the speech check, which you can retry an infinite amount of times, will give you 4 fully armored Enclave shooters to back you up, which is pretty sweet. But it gets even better if we use the presidential keycard on the console under the floor carving, and we can set the turrets to attack Frank instead of us. And if you manage to do both, this fight becomes a total breeze, as Frank now has to fight 1v14. And on top of it all, Frank is weak to the electrical damage from my pulse rifle, and after a few rounds of turns, Frank's body explodes in half in another sick custom death animation. And the giant even tries to walk on his hands for a little bit, before his head pops like a balloon and flies off his chest, permanently killing him.
I just triggered the self-destruct. The work will go on. You didn't do nothing here except seal your own death warrants. Duty. Honor. Courage. Semper Fi.
And we then run out the front door, and we see a cutscene of the Valdez sailing away, as the Enclave oil rig explodes in a massive burst of electrical light, ending the threat of the Enclave for good. Well, at least on the West Coast. And we then get our classic endgame slideshow, to see how our actions affected the wasteland. Arroyo and Vault 13 survivors resettled and founded a new town. The survival skills of the Arroyans, coupled with the technical expertise of the Vault 13 dwellers, plus the guidance of Jarthan as the elder of the village, allowed the village to prosper into the future. MODOK and the Slags made contact, and both communities flourished as a result of their cooperation. And if we head back to the Den and kill Metzger, slavery is mostly eradicated in the Den, and it flourishes as a much more honest and safer gambling town. But if you forget to rescue Vic and leave Metzger alive, the Den then becomes a massive slave trading hub. And since we killed the Raiders and gave the proof of Bishop's involvement to Lynette, Vault City eventually gets brought into the NCR fold. And if you don't kill the Raiders, Vault City has to call for aid from the NCR, occupying it and making it a part of the New Republic even faster. And as for Gecko, its best ending, where you fix and optimize the power plant, along with giving Gordon's economic data disk to McClure like we did, is completely bugged, which results in an ending where the ghouls are enslaved by Vault City until the end of their days, whereas the bugged ending I should have gotten sees the ghouls and Vault City residents learning to work together on the power plant and Vault City expansion, eventually moving past their prejudices. And since we gave our mining chip to the NCR-friendly Marge LaBarge, Redding eventually also comes under NCR control, all according to plan. And New Reno's ending will mostly be based on which family you sided with taking over, which for us would have the right to take over the city using their fancy new weapons that they looted from the Sierra Army Depot. And if you piped Angela Bishop, she has your bastard child, who ends up running the Bishop family at the ripe age of 13. And as for Myron, remember him? He dies shortly after the story, stabbed by a Jet addict while out drinking in the Den. His discovery of Jet being completely forgotten soon after his untimely shanking. And I can't think of a better ending for this guy. And since we sorted out the anti-mutant conspiracy and fixed the Broken Hills mine filtration systems, the town eventually disperses in peace after the uranium in the mine is depleted, Marcus eventually heading west towards an unknown future in search of any living Unity stragglers that he could help. The NCR gains control of Vault 15 and becomes the dominant society in California and the West as a whole, expanding farther northward and setting the groundwork for Fallout New Vegas. And the Shi flourish after I give them the vertebrate plans and exterminate their biggest oppositions, the Hubologists. And it seems that Hubologist endings are not in the game. They were created, but they were never actually implemented. I guess the devs just assumed that nobody would actually side with their Scientology parody, but it's likely just another victim of cut content. The Tanker Vagrants eventually moved on, and unfortunately for the Vault 13 Deathclaws, they all died, wiped out by Frank Horrigan's meaty fists. But with that, that's Fallout 2's main story complete, and you can keep playing from this point onward, unlike the original. So you can complete any side quests you missed, or just to explore for fun. But man, Fallout 2 is a fantastic experience. Despite some minor issues, including the odd bug like the chugging map and bugged endings, along with some occasional performance issues like the mouse input getting frozen and frame rates when in large towns slowing to a crawl, and not to mention how much of a slog the early game is, like the Temple of Trials and the extremely punishing random encounters. But besides these problems, Fallout 2 is just so much better and thicker than Fallout 1 in several ways. The world is larger, more interconnected than ever, and just overall more interesting to learn about each faction and influence them in any way you see fit. The Wasteland has noticeably progressed into the future, and there's so many more conflicts to resolve, characters to meet, weapons to use, side quests to do, car to unlock, and more. Fallout 2 really does feel like a massive step up in content from Fallout 1. This thing is jam-packed with shit to do, and my Fallout 2 playtime was easily twice as long as my Fallout 1 playtime. And it also comes with awesome quality of life mechanical upgrades, like a whole new screen for companion controls, the ability to scroll inventories with your mouse wheel, not having to re-equip stim packs in your item slot each time, and charisma and outdoorsman are much more impactful and important skills, and that's just to name a few. Combat is still mostly the same, and it still suffers from feeling a bit too slow and simple at times, but new weapons and perks allow for more varied and interesting builds, plus enemies are way harder across the board, leading to more interesting overall fights. And the wide array of new weapons and perks allows for more varied and interesting combat builds, encouraging multiple playthroughs to try out all these new toys and skills to see how much damage you can really do, and it's a pretty engaging and satisfying experience. And the story and dialogue here are all really great as well, as although it can get pretty goofy at times, with plenty of dated pop culture references and developer in-jokes, it's still really great shit. And most of these characters are voiceless and faceless 2D sprites, yet so many of them have such strong characterization and writing, they're way more memorable than most 3D, fully voiced Bethesda Fallout characters ever were. And besides that, it's just more classic Fallout greatness, and I had a really great time with this one. And if I had to rank it against other Fallout games, it would easily be top 3 in the series, maybe even top 2. But that's all I got for you today, and if you're still watching this, wow. Also, I love you very much. Here's a little secret kiss for you. Mwah.